Chapter 33:13. Thousands of meters high in the sky, endless clouds drifted, turning into a sea of clouds. The young man with a saber on his back stared from afar, and couldn't help but clench his fists. Young Master Mu, teach him a lesson and let him know your power. Mu Qingyang completely activated the power of his demon bloodline, turning into a dark storm that swept across the sky, vast and boundless. His speed was incomparably fast, and ordinary demon emperors couldn't match him. He barely reached the level of a peak demon emperor, and was comparable to the snow-white cheetah on the 10th floor of the ancient Illumination Palace's 1,000 Kills Pagoda. Chen Zong's current conventional combat strength, when he reached the level of an ordinary demon emperor, was not as good as Mu Qingyang, but after equipping the ancient divine sword armor, it was different. After equipping the ancient divine sword armor, everything was different. His strength, speed, and defense were enhanced, and his tyrannical perception was pushed to the extreme, and he could already capture Mu Qingyang's figure and trajectory. When Chen Zong could capture Mu Qingyang's trajectory, it meant that Mu Qingyang's astonishing speed was much less of a threat to Chen Zong. What's more, Chen Zong's defense had increased by 6 times. Even if he didn't move or dodge, and allowed Mu Qingyang to attack, he would only be slightly injured at most. This was the astonishing defensive power of the universe's indestructible body after being strengthened time and time again. Mu Qingyang also noticed the change in Chen Zong's aura, and his expression turned solemn. In his view, Chen Zong should have activated the power of his bloodline, or some kind of secret technique to increase his strength. The storm of darkness shook and immediately split into 9. They erupted with astonishing speed and attacked from all directions. Every storm of darkness was extremely fast and contained an extremely frightening power. They smashed toward Yi Shiwen in an unstoppable manner. Under Chen Zong's extremely sharp perception, Mu Qingyang's 9 figures were all real, without the slightest bit of illusion. The 9 figures surrounded him in all directions, directly blocking all his dodging, and instantly killing him. The corners of Chen Zong's mouth curled up slightly, and a faint smile hung on his face. Mu Qingyang's method was indeed good, but it was still not enough. He swung his sword. Performing the one-mind sword technique, the sword light turned into 9 streams of sword light and instantly pierced through the air, shooting toward the 9 dark storms. It was as if there were 9 peerless swordsmen performing supreme sword techniques at the same time. Within the one-mind sword technique, there was a terrifying divine will attack. It was the slaughter supremacy, and it directly attacked Mu Qingyang's divine will. As Mu Qingyang's divine will fluctuated, he vaguely felt as if he was about to fall into a sea of blood and a mountain of corpses. This feeling made Mu Qingyang's expression change. What a powerful divine will attack! Furthermore, it was a killing intent attack. It was actually able to shake his divine will. This was simply unbelievable. Under the one-mind sword technique, Mu Qingyang was clearly threatened. 8 of the 9 figures instantly rushed towards Chen Zong in a suicidal manner, and then exploded. Boom! 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 There were 8 consecutive violent explosions, and the terrifying explosions resounded in all directions, shaking the void. Countless cracks appeared in the void, and the sea of clouds within a radius of a few thousand meters was completely shattered. In the distance, within the dark storm, Mu Qingyang's eyes were cold. Black light covered his pupils, and there was a green light flickering in the depths. The power of his shadow clone technique was tyrannical, and when it exploded, it was even more terrifying. Although it consumed a lot of energy after each shadow exploded, it was equivalent to his full strength attack. 8 consecutive shadows exploded, which was equivalent to his full strength attack 8 times. Under such a tyrannical attack, the opponent would definitely not be able to withstand it, and would definitely be severely injured. When the violent explosion gradually dissipated, Mu Qingyang suddenly stared with his eyes wide open. His eyes were filled with shock, and his face was filled with disbelief. How could this be? That figure was actually unscathed. Facing the explosion of his 8 shadows, he was actually unscathed. This was simply unbelievable. Good power. Chen Zong opened his mouth, and his light voice suddenly came out from under the helmet and into Mu Qingyang's ears. Immediately, Mu Qingyang's eyes were filled with a sword light. The sword light was so dazzling, and as soon as it appeared, all directions were plunged into darkness, as if they were being swallowed up. The darkness was incomparably deep, and it instantly spread in all directions, as if they had fallen into a dark void. Only a sword light suddenly appeared, bringing with it an incomparably shocking sharpness. His hair stood on end. Mu Qingyang suppressed the shock in his heart, and immediately exploded with extreme speed, quickly dodging. However, after Chen Zong equipped the ancient god sword armor, the speed of his sword increased by 6 times. The sword speed of the Divine Firmament Secret Sword was originally not slow, and Mu Qingyang was still unable to completely avoid this sword. The sword strike directly cut through the dark storm, and in an instant, it cut through the dark storm like a hot knife through butter. Even Mu Qingyang, who was inside the dark storm, could not avoid being cut, and his tyrannical indestructible body was immediately cut apart. Under the attack of the sword qi, Mu Qingyang had to expend a lot of cultivation to recover. Fear. Panic. Mu Qingyang had never imagined that this person's strength would be so tyrannical. Even the strongest person in the Divine Gate was not so strong. The strongest person in the Divine Gate was also the strongest person in the ancient god dynasty. He was invincible below the demigod realm, but even he could not defeat him with such a sword strike and make him unable to resist. He dared not imagine what kind of strength this person had. Without hesitation, Mu Qingyang directly fled downwards at full speed. Like a gust of wind, he disappeared into the sea of clouds in the blink of an eye. The proud look on the young man's face completely froze, and it was replaced by a look of confusion. He felt as if his brain had been trampled by an ancient mammoth, and he had no idea what to do at all. Young Master Mu was a powerful expert, and he was one of the few transcending Saint Realm experts in the Divine Firmament dynasty. There were less than 10 transcending Saint Realm experts in the entire ancient god dynasty, and young Master Mu was one of them. Although he was not the strongest transcending Saint Realm expert, as long as he was a transcending Saint Realm expert, his strength must be extraordinary, and he could crush all true saints. But now, young Master Mu had escaped. What had happened? Chen Zong did not chase after Mu Qingyang. The power of the sword was enough to let Mu Qingyang know his strength, and it was equivalent to showing his strength to the world, letting them know that he was not to be trifled with. If not for the demigods, no one would be able to compete with him. The news of Mu Qingyang's defeat swept through the world like a storm, and the person who had defeated him was an outer disciple of the ancient god temple, Peerless Sword Saint Chen Zong, who also had the top demonic bloodline. Transcending Saint Realm. Peerless Sword Saint Chen Zong was also a transcending Saint Realm expert, and he was even more powerful than Mu Qingyang. It was sensational. Transcending Saint Realm experts were extremely rare, and each of them was the best in the world. Many people who wanted to use other means to get the top demonic bloodline in Chen Zong's hands gave up the idea. A transcending Saint Realm expert who could defeat Mu Qingyang, unless a demigod took action, no one could do anything to him. However, would a demigod take action because of this? It was not worthwhile, and they could not afford to lose face. It felt like a group of children fighting for a toy, and if an adult interfered, the other adults would feel embarrassed, and the situation was even more serious for a demigod. Even if it was for a descendant that they valued, a demigod would not casually take action, and would at least exchange for something of equal value. After Chen Zong returned to the ancient Illumination Palace, he quietly waited for the transaction to come. It was not impossible to wait for a few more years. While waiting, Chernzong continued to comprehend swordsmanship in the secret palace, trying his best to improve his swordsmanship to a higher level. There was no limit to the sword. This was Chernzong's understanding. Perhaps there was a limit to one's cultivation, but there was no limit to one's sword skills. As long as one was willing to put in the effort, one could continue to comprehend and improve his sword skills. Even if the improvement was slower, one would not reach the limit and could not improve anymore. In the meantime, Chernzong waited for an unexpected person to arrive. Xiao Cheng. He was a transcendent saint expert from the Heaven Heart dynasty. When he arrived, Chernzong immediately received him. After all, before the entrance of ancient region, Xiao Cheng had told Chernzong some things about the ancestral land, so that Chernzong could be more prepared. More or less, it was a favor. Brother Chen, the reason I'm here is because of the top-grade demonic bloodline in your hands, Xiao Cheng said with a smile. Brother Xiao Cheng, do you have 2 heavenly souls? Chernzong asked. It was Chernzong's decision to exchange the peak eternal darkness bloodline for 2 heavenly souls. I don't. Xiao Cheng shook his head. Of course there was a favor, but a favor was a favor, and Chernzong was willing to repay it, but not in this way or at this time. Heavenly souls were too important to him. Brother Chen, although I do not have 2 heavenly souls, I can provide you with 1 chance to obtain a heavenly soul. How many heavenly souls you can obtain in the end will depend on your own ability, Xiao Cheng said with a faint smile on his face. Chernzong couldn't help but stare at Xiao Cheng, waiting for him to continue. What chance? Could it be, according to what I know, the celestial epic fragment will open in 3 years, and I can get a slot? Xiao Cheng smiled. Xiao Cheng was the strongest expert in the Heaven Heart dynasty, the strongest expert below the demigod realm, a transcendent saint expert equivalent to a peak demon emperor. With Xiao Cheng's status, it wasn't difficult for him to get a slot. Hearing Xiao Cheng's words, Chernzong's eyes lit up. Yes, if he couldn't get 2 heavenly souls, he could enter the celestial epic fragment and obtain them personally. However, he belonged to the ancient Mirror God dynasty, and the celestial epic fragment belonged to the Heaven Heart dynasty. It was extremely difficult to get a slot, and Chernzong had no way out, so he had to exchange the bloodline of the eternal dark tree for 2 heavenly souls. Chernzong knew that the value was actually not equal. With his strength, it shouldn't be difficult to enter the celestial epic fragment and obtain heavenly souls. He might even be able to get 3 or more heavenly souls. However, Chernzong didn't agree directly, but replied to Xiao Cheng that he needed some time to consider. Brother Chen, you can consider it, but I hope you can give me an accurate answer within a year, Xiao Cheng said seriously. Okay. Chernzong nodded and responded seriously. Xiao Cheng took his leave, but Chernzong already had an intention. He just wanted to wait and see if anyone would exchange 2 heavenly souls with him. Chapter 33:14. The sky was blue and the sun hung high in the sky, emitting a strong light that illuminated the land and all living things. An indescribably hot holy aura spread out in all directions, filling the endless air, making people feel a burst of warmth when they breathed. If the sky in the world of the demonic universe era fragment was dark and the aura was cold, then it was the opposite here. Celestial universe era fragment. In the end, Chernzong did not wait for anyone to take out 2 heavenly souls to exchange for the eternal dark tree bloodline. The highest bid was 1 heavenly soul. 1 heavenly soul in exchange for a top-notch demonic race bloodline. The value was actually equal. However, Chernzong chose to exchange with Xiao Cheng in the end. Using the eternal dark tree bloodline in exchange for a place to enter the celestial universe era fragment would not allow him to obtain a heavenly soul directly. He might not even be able to obtain a heavenly soul, but it was the only way to obtain more heavenly souls. Chernzong believed in his strength. With his strength, he should be able to obtain a heavenly soul. Fortunately, Chernzong did not integrate the demonic race bloodline. Otherwise, he might not be able to move an inch in the celestial universe era fragment. After all, the demonic race bloodline and the celestial race bloodline had opposite characteristics. Even if there was a disguise, it could not be completely disguised. Regarding this, Xiaoqing told Chernzong very clearly. He thought that Chernzong had integrated the demonic race bloodline. After refining the light soul essence, Chernzong disguised himself as a member of the celestial race and entered the celestial universe era fragment with the other origin race members who had obtained a place. A person from the ancient reflection god dynasty had to enter the celestial universe era fragment that was under the control of the sky heart god dynasty. No matter what, it would make people unhappy. However, this quota was valid. It was given by the strongest expert under the demigod realm in the sky heart god dynasty. Unless a demigod spoke, no one could deny it. No one invited Chernzong to move together, and Chernzong did not plan to move with the others. This was because the origin race members who entered together were all true saints. None of them were transcending saints. The world discovered by the Heaven Heart God dynasty in the Celestial Universe epic fragment was called the Divine Radiance dynasty. It was also a world where demigods did not appear. The ranks of the heavenly human tribe were divided into Heavenly Soldier, Heavenly Brave, Heavenly General, Heavenly Monarch, Heavenly Venerable, and Heavenly God. A Heavenly Lord was equivalent to a Demon Lord, and a Heavenly King was equivalent to a Demon King. It was equivalent to a peak True Sage or even an extreme True Sage. As for Empyreans, they were equivalent to Demon Emperors and Transcendent Saints. Before Chernzong entered, Xiaoqing had naturally told Chernzong a lot of information about the Divine Radiance dynasty. The Divine Radiance dynasty did not exist in the form of a tribe like the demon tribe's Great Black Sky Empire. Instead, it consisted of many cities. Every city had a city lord and so on. Every city lord was an official of the dynasty and was appointed by the dynasty. Of course, in order to become a city lord, one must have sufficient strength. Otherwise, it would not be enough to convince the masses. Like the demon tribe, the heavenly human tribe was also very particular about bloodlines. Without a strong enough bloodline, it would not be so easy to become a strong person. It might even be impossible. However, if one had a strong enough bloodline, the difficulty of becoming a strong person would be greatly reduced. In the Divine Radiance dynasty, the Divine Radiance imperial family was the leader. The Divine Radiance Emperor was an extreme heavenly venerable. He was the strongest among the extreme heavenly venerables. He had a heavenly divine artifact and was extremely powerful. Chernzong acted alone and directly entered a city. With the disguise of the light spirit essence, he did not have to worry about exposing his identity. After all, he did not have the demon tribe bloodline. According to his experience in the Great Black Sky Empire, it would not be so easy for his identity to be exposed. Moreover, his current strength had completely surpassed that of when he had first entered the Great Black Sky Empire. It was many times more powerful. It was like heaven and earth. This time, Chernzong did not plan to take things slowly like when he had first entered the Great Black Sky Empire. Instead, he planned to sweep through with lightning speed and obtain the heavenly souls as quickly as possible. I will first obtain the first heavenly soul and use the ancient god armor refining technique to refine it and increase the power of the ancient god sword armor. With greater strength, it will be easier for me to obtain the second heavenly soul, Chernzong thought to himself as his eyes sparkled. After entering the city, he began to gather information about the strong people, especially the heavenly venerables. According to his speculation, there should be more heavenly venerables in the Divine Radiance dynasty than in the Great Black Sky Empire. Although the bloodlines of the heavenly human tribe and the demon tribe were on par, after all, the heavenly human tribe was in the universe epic after the ancient god universe epic, while the demon tribe was in the universe epoch after the heavenly human tribe. In the end, there was still some difference. Heavenly venerables were also divided into ordinary, top, and extreme. "I'll find an ordinary heavenly venerables to kill first," Chenzong said to himself. It would be easier for him to kill an ordinary heavenly venerables if he went all out. As long as he acted quickly and stealthily enough, it would not cause any big waves in a short period of time. Of course, if he could purchase a heavenly soul, he would buy it immediately. Although Chenzong was confident in his own strength, he was still somewhat fearful of a place like the Divine Radiance dynasty. Just because the sky gods did not appear did not mean that there were no sky gods. They were peerless fighters equivalent to the demigod realm. Once they attacked, he would be in danger. Unfortunately, Chenzong did his best to gather information but did not find a way to purchase a heavenly soul. In fact, someone would not sell a treasure like a heavenly venerate even if they obtained it. It was equivalent to the inheritance of a heavenly venerate. Such an inheritance meant that after obtaining it, one would have a high chance of becoming a heavenly venerate. Who would be willing to sell it? Then, it's you, heavenly venerate Long River. Chenzong chose his target. His eyes flickered continuously as he immediately searched for all kinds of information about heavenly venerate Long River to find traces of him. After all, heavenly venerate fighters stood at the peak. Some were in seclusion and were difficult to find. Some were even missing. However, after repeated efforts by Chenzong, he finally found the place where heavenly venerate Long River was in seclusion after spending a lot of time. The flowing light river's water was turbulent and surging. Above the waves, there were layers of light that were overflowing with color. As the river flowed endlessly, it gave people the feeling that the river was glowing. Especially at night, the flowing light river shone even more brilliantly under the night sky. From afar, it looked like a band of light was dancing. It also looked like a light dragon was meandering on the ground. When Chenzong arrived at the flowing light river, it was daytime. As he looked at the surging river water, the light above it was very dazzling. This river was thousands of meters wide, and the water flowed rapidly, bringing with it waves of deafening roars. Chenzong was amazed by the river water but did not pay too much attention to it. The purpose of coming here was not to look at the scenery. No matter how beautiful the scenery was, it was useless. Heavenly venerate Long River was in seclusion at the bottom of the flowing light river. However, which section was it located at? The flowing light river was thousands of meters wide. As for its length, it was even more astonishing. It was thousands of miles long. Chenzong stood on the flowing light river and immediately spread out his mixed yuan heart force to search quickly. With each step, he crossed thousands of meters. With each step, the surging waves of the river water churned. However, they could not splash onto Chenzong at all. Even though the flowing light river was thousands of miles long, Chenzong could cross 20 miles with each step. 10 steps would be 200 miles, and 100 steps would be 2,000 miles. It was not too difficult to search it. Mixed yuan heart force penetrated the bottom of the river. The shallowest parts were tens of meters deep, while the deepest parts were thousands of meters deep. After searching continuously, Chenzong finally found an underwater mansion at the deepest part of the flowing light river. The underwater mansion was not big. Its surface was covered with a layer of faint fluorescent light. As the fluorescent light fluctuated slightly, it immediately isolated the water pressure. Not a single drop of water could enter it. Chenzong's mixed yuan heart force was also isolated outside. Is heavenly venerate Long River inside? Chenzong's eyes flashed as he thought to himself. At the same time, his body sank. In the blink of an eye, he entered the flowing light river and approached the underwater mansion. The underwater mansion was definitely at the deepest part of the flowing light river. It was more than 1,000 meters deep. The deeper he went, the more astonishing the water pressure was. It was even more astonishing than the water pressure of an ordinary river. However, it did not affect Chen Zong much. Chen Zong restrained his aura and approached the underwater mansion. Then, he equipped the ancient divine sword armor and tried to conceal his aura as much as possible. If the underwater mansion was indeed the place where Heavenly Venerate Long River was cultivating in seclusion, then he would try his best not to alarm him and end the battle quickly. Chen Zong unsheathed his sword, condensing an incomparably shocking amount of energy as he directly pierced through the layer of energy surrounding the underwater residence. Next, he sliced open a crack, and Chen Zong's mixed yuan heart force instantly entered, locking onto one of the figures within. The figure was cultivating in seclusion. There were traces of luminous aura lingering around him like flowing water. Under Chen Zong's extremely sharp senses, each of the luminous aura contained a tyrannical fluctuation that faintly surpassed the Demon Lord level and reached the Demon Overlord level. Even if this person was not Heavenly Venerate Long River, he was still a Heavenly Venerate level expert. As long as he was a Heavenly Venerate level expert. As a Heavenly Venerate level expert, this person also seemed to have sensed that the underwater mansion's defense was being torn apart and a trace of danger was approaching. He immediately broke out of his seclusion, and his tyrannical aura also erupted in an instant. The subtle aura that was originally surrounding him suddenly surged, as if it had transformed into dragons that were circling around and destroying everything. At the same time, a sword light seemed to have pierced through space and time to kill. The sword was merciless and only wanted to take a life. Divine Firmament. It was an extremely sharp sword that seized all the light. Darkness suddenly descended, and only that peerlessly sharp sword light pierced through the air. The sound it made was faint, and it cut through the sky, directly slicing the void apart, as if it was an understatement. His hair stood on end. An extremely terrifying and fatal sense of danger swept over and covered his entire body. It directly rushed into the depths of his heart and body, causing Heavenly Venerate Long River to be extremely frightened. Who was it? Who on earth had actually infiltrated his underwater mansion to attack him? The tyrannical power of this sword actually caused him to tremble and feel the shadow of death looming over him. This person was definitely stronger than him. Who on earth was this Heavenly Venerate level expert that wanted to kill him? There was no time to think. Heavenly Venerate Long River immediately unleashed his full strength without any hesitation or reservation. Chapter 33:15. In Heavenly Venerable Long River's underwater residence, Chen Zong sheathed his sword. There was a corpse at his feet. It was Heavenly Venerable Long River's corpse. Although Heavenly Venerable Long River was a Heavenly Venerable, he was only a normal Heavenly Venerable. He had been cultivating in seclusion for many years, so his strength was limited. Once his strength reached the Heavenly Venerable level, it would be even more difficult to improve further. Most Heavenly Venerables were like this. Only a few Heavenly Venerables could significantly improve their strength. For example, Chen Zong. Chen Zong, who was armed with the general-level ancient divine sword armor, had strength that was close to the peak of the Demon Emperor level, which was also the peak of the Heavenly Venerable level. Moreover, he had made a calculated move. The Divine Firmament's secret sword Ultimate Kill brought with it an endless sharpness that was unstoppable. It directly shattered Heavenly Venerable Long River's explosive means and his tyrannical bloodline body. Suppress. Although he could not kill Heavenly Venerable Long River with one strike, he was still able to suppress him. After a few more strikes, Heavenly Venerable Long River's cultivation power was depleted and he was killed. It could be said that if Chen Zong had not obtained the Blood Sword art, it would not have been so easy to kill Heavenly Venerable Long River even with his current strength. After obtaining the Blood Sword art, he had integrated his Divine Intent attack into it to suppress Heavenly Venerable Long River to a greater extent, preventing him from escaping and then killing him. Now, Chernzong had obtained heavenly venerable long rivers, heavenly soul. The heavenly soul was about the size of a baby's fist. It was completely white, and there seemed to be dense light flowing inside it. It gave off an indescribable, lofty, and sacred aura. The demon overlord race was born with the power of darkness. The most basic power contained in their bloodline was the power of darkness. Other powers were secondary. Meanwhile, the heavenly human race was born with the power of light. Heavenly venerable long rivers, heavenly soul, was the condensation of the essence of his bloodline and power. It was the power of light, heavenly water. Heavenly venerables could no longer refine their bloodline because they had already condensed the essence of their bloodline and power into a heavenly soul. Only heavenly king-level powerhouses could refine their bloodline. Let's begin. Chernzong stared at the heavenly soul in his hand and sensed the profound aura fluctuations within it. His eyes involuntarily shone brightly, and he was extremely happy. Refine. First, he would refine it with the ancient god armor refining technique to increase the power of the ancient god sword armor and further increase his own strength. Then, he would continue. As for hunting heavenly venerable rank powerhouses, Chernzong did not have any psychological burden since they were strangers. This was the heavenly human tribe, not the human tribe. Moreover, this was not the chaos multiverse, so things were different. Under the activation of the ancient god armor technique, a mysterious power suddenly filled the air. It spread into the cauldron in his hand. Immediately, a trace of extremely pure power was absorbed from the cauldron and integrated into the ancient god sword armor. The ancient god sword armor glowed slightly, and its aura changed little by little. The aura became stronger and more mysterious. The patterns on the ancient god sword armor also changed. Ripple. A strong aura spread out from the ancient god sword armor, and the power of the cauldron was being consumed. After a while, the power of the cauldron in Chernzong's hand was completely consumed. What's going on? Chernzong was stunned. After the ancient god sword armor devoured all the power of the cauldron, it did not upgrade. It was still at the general level. After carefully sensing and observing it, Chernzong found that the patterns on the ancient god sword armor were brighter and brighter. It constantly emitted a shocking aura fluctuation. It was stronger than before. It was much stronger, but it still did not upgrade. Is it because the power of the cauldron is not enough? Chernzong frowned slightly and guessed. It seemed to be the case. The power of one cauldron was not enough to upgrade the ancient god sword armor from the general level to the king level. Then, he could only try to get another cauldron. Fortunately, I used the bloodline of the eternal darkness tree to exchange for a place to enter the celestial epic fragment of the celestial universe. Chernzong thought to himself, if someone really used two cauldrons to exchange with him, what would he do when he found that one cauldron was not enough to upgrade the ancient god sword armor from the general level to the king level? Would he use the second cauldron? Or would he give it to Digio? Whether he used it himself or gave it to Digio, he had to find a way to get the third cauldron. It seemed that exchanging the bloodline of the eternal dark tree for a slot to enter the Deva universe epic relic world was still a good deal. He quickly put away heavenly venerable long rivers storage divine item. The things inside were useless to him, but he could sell them. They were still worth a lot. He looked for the second heavenly venerable. After spending a lot of time and money, Chernzong found out where the second heavenly venerable was. Divine Light Heavenly Venerable. This was a top-level heavenly venerable. He was very powerful. There was news that he had appeared at the Heavenly Drum Mountain not long ago. The Heavenly Drum Mountain was 5,000 meters tall. There was little vegetation on the mountain, and it was all grayish-white rocks. When a strong wind blew past, the mountain would make thumping sounds like the beating of heavenly drums. That was why it was called the Heavenly Drum Mountain. The Heavenly Drum Mountain was considered a wonder in the Divine Radiance dynasty. It often attracted many people. It was said that the sound of the wind drums on the heavenly drum mountain was helpful for cultivation and comprehension. Some people had gained something from listening to the sound of the drums. They broke through their cultivation or comprehended some kind of superb technique. This made the heavenly drum mountain even more famous in the dynasty. Often, cultivators would come from all directions just to listen to the sound of the wind drums. However, the sound of the wind drums on the heavenly drum mountain did not sound all the time. There was usually a gap between 1 month and 3 months. The duration of each sound was not fixed. It could be long or short. 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 It could be short or long. Sword light streaked across the sky. Its speed was astonishing as it arrived at the heavenly drum mountain. This was because someone had seen Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang there before. Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang was a strong practitioner who liked to teach others. He liked to give pointers to others. It was because of this that people knew about him. If possible, Chern Zong actually intended to find another ordinary Heavenly Venerable to kill. That would be easier. However, the information he got was that it was Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang. Of course, there were other Heavenly Venerables as well. For example, the Divine Radiance Great Emperor of the Divine Radiance dynasty was in the imperial family. He had a clear goal. Unfortunately, the Divine Radiance Great Emperor's bloodline was at the supreme level. His ability was at the peak of the Heavenly Venerable realm. He had a heavenly divine implement and was extremely powerful. Even Chern Zong was not confident that he could defeat him. Moreover, the Divine Radiance Great Emperor was not the only Heavenly Venerable in the Divine Imperial Palace. The sword light arrived. Chern Zong landed on the heavenly drum mountain. The mixed Yuan heart force immediately spread out. It swept across and locked onto one of them. It was an extremely powerful aura. It was a sacred and boundless aura. It was a bright and vast aura. It was very powerful. It was much more powerful than Heavenly Venerable Chang He. Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang. Who is it? Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang was in the sky. At the top of the heavenly drum mountain, if someone came, he would give them pointers. This was where his pleasure lay. I am Sword Master Tianguang. I have been in seclusion for 1,000 years. Today I will test my swordsmanship. Who can compete with me? Chern Zong said. His voice carried an astonishing sharpness. It resounded through the heavens and the earth. An astonishing sword will soar into the sky. The sword will traverse the heavens and the earth, suppressing the heavenly drum mountain. It was as if it had turned into an invisible giant sword. It directly pressed towards Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang. This was an identity that Chern Zong had casually made up for himself. He was a sword maniac who had been in seclusion for 1,000 years. He wanted to test his swordsmanship. In this way, even if he killed Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang, it would at most cause a stir. It would not arouse any suspicion. Friend, I don't want to fight, Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang responded. Cut the crap. Chern Zong's tone was extremely overbearing. The powerful sword will swept across the sky. The astonishing sword will directly locked onto Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang and pressed towards him. In the next moment, Chern Zong took a step forward. He became one with his sword and transformed into a beam of sword light. The heavenly will sword was also unsheathed in an instant. Kill. The purpose of this trip was to kill Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang. The so-called test of his swordsmanship was just a reason, an excuse. How could he stop just because Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang said he did not want to fight? If Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang did not attack, Chern Zong would not hold back at all. Friend, don't go too far. Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang's face darkened. His tone was sullen. At the same time, he transformed into a beam of flowing light and instantly avoided Chern Zong's sword. Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang was a top-level Heavenly Venerable. His strength was tyrannical. What was even more amazing was his speed. Chunzong's sword came again. He kept attacking Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang, who was dodging. Finally, he was enraged. "Friend, if you don't stop now, don't blame me for being ruthless." Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang's tone was low. There was a deep anger and murderous intent. He was a Heavenly Venerable level elite. He was also a top-level Heavenly Venerable. He was one of the few elites in the entire Divine Brilliance dynasty. Although he liked to teach others and had a relatively gentle temperament, it did not mean that he did not have a temper. Anyone would be angry if they were forced to do so, let alone a Heavenly Venerable level elite. "Either you defeat me or I defeat you," Chunzong responded coldly. He held his sword and attacked again. "As you wish," Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang said in a low voice. His body shone brightly. In an instant, it exploded and turned into beams of flowing light. However, they were as sharp as swords. One after another, they drew stunning arcs. They were like swords piercing through the air. They attacked Chunzong. They were fast, fierce, and powerful. They were even more terrifying than Mu Qingyang's attack. In just an instant, dozens of flowing lights pierced through the air like long spears and attacked Chunzong. They destroyed Chunzong's sword light. They wanted to kill Chunzong directly. Armed. Without hesitation, Chunzong immediately armed himself with the ancient god sword armor. With the more powerful ancient god sword armor on his body, Chunzong's strength reached the level of a top-level Heavenly Venerable. However, Chunzong did not directly explode with all his strength. Instead, he held back and limited it to the level of a top-level Heavenly Venerable. He did not want to scare Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang away. Otherwise, when facing a top-level Heavenly Venerable, as long as Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang was not crazy, he would not fight to the death. He would definitely escape. If a top-level Heavenly Venerable elite who was good at speed was determined to escape, even if the Divine Brilliance Great Emperor attacked, it would be difficult to guarantee that he would be able to kill him. Chunzong intended to fight Heavenly Venerable Shun Guang with the strength of a top-level Heavenly Venerable. At the critical moment, he would explode with all his strength to deliver a fatal blow. This would determine life and death. Even if his opponent realized that something was wrong and wanted to escape, he would lose the best opportunity. Chapter 33:16. On the heavenly drum mountain, the light was shining brightly. It was like thousands of rays of light, which surprised many cultivators on the mountain. What happened? Could it be that a treasure has appeared? Idiot! How could there be a treasure on the heavenly drum mountain? It seems like Lord Shenguang is fighting with someone. Only a Heavenly Venerable can fight with Lord Shenguang. Which Heavenly Venerable is it? After all, Heavenly Venerables were the strongest cultivators who stood at the top. Each of them was extremely powerful. Compared to cultivators of other levels, they were few in number. If there was no big conflict between Heavenly Venerables, they would not fight. Even if they did, they would not fight in front of others. They would find a secret place and would not fight to the death. After all, life and death between Heavenly Venerables was not so easy. If an ultimate Heavenly Venerable wanted to kill a top Heavenly Venerable, the success rate would not be very high unless they were well prepared. Of course, if an ultimate Heavenly Venerable wanted to kill an ordinary Heavenly Venerable, it was possible. There had not been a battle between Heavenly Venerables in the Divine Brilliance dynasty for many years. There had not even been a death of a Heavenly Venerable. As for Heavenly Venerable Chang He's death, it was only because he had been cultivating in seclusion for many years. He was also suddenly attacked by Chunzong. He was killed in a few moves. The commotion was very subtle. Therefore, no one knew about it yet. Otherwise, it would definitely cause a huge commotion and alarm the entire dynasty. Now, there was a Heavenly Venerable fighting. How shocking was that? It could be determined that one of the combatants was Lord Shenguang. He was a famous top Empyrean within the entire dynasty. He had always been known for his gentle temperament and his love for teaching others. Many people had received guidance from Lord Xinguang. Unfortunately, he never accepted disciples. Many people wanted to worship him as a teacher after receiving his guidance, but they were all rejected. So who was the other person? Which heavenly venerable was it? Immediately, someone came closer and heard Chen Zong's words. Therefore, they spread the news. Sword Master Tianguang? Who was that? Which heavenly venerable was it? After cultivating in seclusion for 1,000 years, he had achieved great success in his sword Dao, so he came out to test his sword Dao. His reason was very normal and did not arouse the slightest suspicion. Chen Zong maintained the strength of a top Empyrean and fought with Empyrean Xinguang endlessly. He displayed the one-mind divine sword technique. His supremacy filled the air and constantly attacked Empyrean Xinguang. Unfortunately, Chen Zong was hiding his strength. In addition to the tyrannical strength of Empyrean Xinguang, his divine will was also very tyrannical. Therefore, the divine will of one-mind divine sword technique was unable to threaten Empyrean Xinguang. Even so, the tyrannical power of Chen Zong's swordsmanship was enough to threaten Empyrean Xinguang. Empyrean Xinguang had no choice but to erupt with all his strength. Holy light explosion. As he struck out with his palm, a vast amount of divine light condensed. The divine light was boundless, and it carried with it an extremely terrifying power. It was as if it was about to shatter the vacuum and directly smash Chen Zong into pieces. Anger. Empyrean Xinguang was obviously enraged. He was extremely furious, and he attacked with all his might without mercy. Chen Zong's expression did not change. The sword light slashed across the sky. The sword light was extremely sharp, and it cut through everything. It seemed that there was nothing between heaven and earth that could resist it. Divine sky. The ancient god sword armor that had swallowed a heavenly soul could not be upgraded from the general level to the king level. However, its power had indeed increased significantly. It made Chen Zong's strength even more tyrannical. Even if he deliberately hid his strength, the power of Chen Zong's sword was very amazing. Empyrean Xinguang attacked. Rays of divine light with terrible power broke through the air and attacked Chen Zong. The void was pierced and shattered. Each ray of divine light seemed to be able to destroy mountains. Chen Zong waved his sword and shattered the rays of divine light. He continued to approach Empyrean Xinguang. It was close combat. Comparatively speaking, Empyrean Xinguang was not good at close combat. However, Chen Zong was very good at it. As soon as he got close, Empyrean Xinguang immediately found that he was suppressed. He gradually fell into a disadvantage. He immediately burst out with his full speed. With his super speed, he opened up the distance and once again shot out rays of divine light. Speed. The extreme speed was displayed by Empyrean Xinguang. His figure completely disappeared. Between heaven and earth, there was only a stream of light that flashed endlessly. It was difficult to capture. If Chen Zong did not equip the ancient god sword armor, his strength would be at the level of an ordinary Empyrean. It was impossible to avoid or even capture such speed. Fortunately, the ancient god sword armor had significantly improved Chen Zong's strength. Even if he deliberately hid his strength, a foundation was a foundation, and strength was strength. It still existed. No matter how fast Empyrean Xinguang erupted, he could not really hurt Chen Zong. On the contrary, Chen Zong's sword was constantly resisting Chen Zong. He could not break through Chen Zong's defense. Chen Zong's divine will was very tyrannical. The impact of the divine will contained in Empyrean Xinguang's divine light could not shake Chen Zong. It was known that Chen Zong had never stopped practicing the Ghost Fire Jade Tempering Mantra. Even if the effect became more subtle, he was still gradually improving. He had already surpassed the past and reached a higher level. Fierce battle. Chen Zong hid his strength. The battle with Emperor Xinguang was extremely fierce. The aftermath of the extremely tyrannical attacks fell on the Heavenly Drum Mountain. Suddenly, the Heavenly Drum Mountain began to crumble. Pieces of stone sputtered, carrying with them an amazing force that shattered the vacuum. If this continued, the Heavenly Drum Mountain would most likely be destroyed. Fortunately, although Emperor Xinguang was angry, he still maintained a certain level of rationality. He knew that the Heavenly Drum Mountain was a place of opportunity. He could not bear to destroy it. Therefore, he rushed towards the sky. Chen Zong transformed into a sword light and quickly chased after him. Above the sky, endless strong light continued to shine. The divine light was vast and boundless, shattering the sea of clouds. Countless cracks spread across the sky. As they crisscrossed, each of them was filled with an incomparably terrifying aura. As the battle continued, his strength continued to be consumed. Emperor Xinguang's anger gradually dissipated. That murderous intent also faded because more than half of his strength had been consumed. His opponent's strength was tyrannical and his swordsmanship was superb. It was difficult for him to defeat his opponent. It was simply impossible. Since he could not do it, there was no benefit in continuing to fight. Did he want to fight to the death? Friend, it's over. Emperor Xinguang immediately opened up the distance and said. He immediately flew away. He did not want to fight anymore. However, how could Chen Zong let him do as he wished? Otherwise, he would have failed this time. Don't even think about leaving. Chen Zong roared, You and I have not determined the winner yet. Friend, I have lost this battle, Emperor Xinguang replied immediately. Xinguang Tianzuan responded immediately. He did not feel aggrieved. After all, his opponent's strength was indeed very strong. In this battle, he had not gained any advantage. On the contrary, once his opponent got close to him, he would be at a disadvantage. It was not impossible for him to admit defeat. If you want to leave, it is not impossible. You just have to take one move of my secret sword. Chen Zong immediately said. His tone was cold. Otherwise, even if I have to go to the ends of the earth, I will not give up. What a headache! Emperor Xinguang had a big headache. How could there be such a person? It was really annoying. Of course, such people did exist. They were the kind of people who were war demons and war maniacs. If such people did not die, their future strength would be very terrifying. In all fairness, Emperor Xinguang felt that he admired such people very much. However, he did not like them very much, especially when he was facing them directly. Okay, I will take one move of your secret sword. Emperor Xinguang could only respond in this way. Otherwise, his opponent's speed was very fast. If he wanted to pursue, it would be very difficult to escape. This secret sword is the result of my closed-door training for 1,000 years. It is very powerful, but I have never really used it. So, I cannot guarantee that you can take it. Chen Zong seemed to be very kind and reminded him. Come at me. Emperor Xinguang responded. His whole body was surrounded by strands of divine light, layer by layer. If he wanted to completely get rid of Chen Zong, it was not impossible. He only needed to use one secret technique. It was just that he did not want to use that secret technique unless it was a last resort, because it would cost him a lot. His opponent's strength was indeed very strong, but Emperor Xinguang was still very confident in his own strength. If he used all of his strength to resist one move of his opponent's secret sword, he could do it. At most, he would be injured. For Emperor level, there was no such thing as a fatal injury. As long as his cultivation was not exhausted, he could quickly recover from any injury. So, why not take one move of his opponent's secret sword head-on? Emperor Xinguang was in high spirits, but he was not overconfident. He released all of his strength and displayed a secret technique. It was a defensive secret technique. It was a pure defensive secret technique, but it had an amazing defensive power. Even if his opponent's strength was higher than his, it was impossible to break through the defense of this secret technique and cause him obvious injuries. It was stable. Seeing his opponent like this, Chen Zong's expression did not change. His eyes flashed with cold light, and his body was filled with an aura. That aura was a bit obscure, and as soon as it appeared, the surrounding wind immediately stopped. A secret sword. Chen Zong was indeed going to display a secret sword, and it was indeed a secret sword that he had recently comprehended. Chen Zong was not lying about this. The secret sword that he was about to display was the one that Chen Zong had finally comprehended when he was in closed-door training in the ancient god dynasty's ancient god temple. This secret sword was a secret sword that he had comprehended from the blood sword secret technique. It could be said that this secret sword was equivalent to the essence of the blood sword secret technique. The blood sword secret technique had 4 secret swords: demonic light, bloody slaughter, and heavy sword kill. The 4th secret sword, blood sword azura, was the fusion of the essence of the first 3 secret swords. The new secret sword that Chen Zong was about to display was the fusion of the essence of the 4 secret swords of the blood sword secret technique. It was stronger than blood sword azura. In the end, Chen Zong's current strength had completely surpassed the blood sword demon emperor's. His foundation and accumulation in the way of the sword was not something that the blood sword demon emperor could compare with. His high realm and strong foundation allowed Chen Zong to create more powerful secret swords from his original foundation. A red glow immediately gathered in the depths of Chen Zong's jet-black pupils, after which it blossomed like a blood flower. An obscure murderous intent immediately spread out from Chen Zong's body. It was faint at the beginning, but it rapidly grew stronger. Stop. The surrounding wind completely stopped. Solidify. Even the void was frozen by this extremely terrifying and obscure sword intent. The white clouds seemed to have turned into a picture scroll. Chapter 33:17. Thousands of meters above the heavenly drum mountain, rays of divine light were constantly circling and stacking, becoming more and more vigorous and condensed. Looking from afar, it was like a divine sun in the sky, emitting endless rays of light. It was so dazzling, so eye-catching, and so tyrannical and boundless, like a tsunami, roaring and repelling the void, surging out like an avalanche. Chen Zong stared at Xinguang's Skylord, and the blood-red color in his eyes became more and more obvious. His whole body suddenly trembled, and the obscure and cold aura also paused for a moment, then exploded. The sky wind was vast, whistling endlessly, as if to blow everything away. A shadow appeared on Chen Zong's body, a shadow that emitted a strong divine light, but the inside of the shadow was blood-red. However, with the camouflage of the light essence, the blood-red did not look the slightest bit strange. Instead, it gave off a feeling of righteousness. That shadow seemed to have come from the abyss, from the hell of death. As soon as it appeared, the original stagnant feeling was strengthened to the extreme. Blood Shura. This secret sword was only one word different from the name of the strongest move of the blood sword secret art, or rather, it was only one word less. However, there was a clear difference in power, because this secret sword was truly Chen Zong's secret sword. Chen Zong had spent many years continuously comprehending it, and finally created it according to his own swordsmanship and swordsmanship. With this sword, there was no need to use the blood sword secret art. Stagnation. Pause. Within thousands of meters, it was as if it had turned into a picture scroll, isolated from thousands of meters away. Kill. The blood-red shadow on his body synchronized with Chen Zong's and swung out a sword. It seemed to be a simple sword, but it seemed to have completely displayed Chen Zong's power. 2 sword lights overlapped, instantly piercing through the air towards Empyrean Xinguang. The supreme slaughter intent contained within was tyrannical to the extreme. Chen Zong unreservedly displayed this attack. It was a strike from an ultimate Empyrean. Exalted Shunguang was struck by the killing intent. His divine will was immediately shaken, as if it was about to be split apart. He saw a long river of blood rushing towards him. The blood-red waves rolled endlessly. It was as if there were countless pale arms reaching out from the river, carrying with them the will of death. He also saw a mountain of bones piled up between the heavens and the earth. It was majestic and endless. A white bone emperor sat atop the mountain of bones. His eyes burned with the pale flames of death, harvesting the life of all living things. Horrifying! In the depths of Shunguang Empyrean's heart, there was a sudden surge of unspeakable horror. He felt that he had been cheated. The power of that secret sword was beyond his imagination. It wasn't something a peak Empyrean could use. It was at the level of an ultimate Empyrean. The difference of one level was at least double. They couldn't block it. Empyrean Shunguang was well aware of his own abilities. He simply could not block the attack of an ultimate Empyrean, and it was also a very tyrannical attack. Run! Without hesitation, Empyrean Shunguang wanted to withdraw and escape. Even if he had to pay a certain price, he would not hesitate. This was because he was keenly aware that the purpose of the other party seemed to be to kill him. There was no enmity or hatred. Why would the other party want to kill him? There was no time to think. It was better to escape first. However, it was too late. When he agreed to accept Chen Zong's secret sword, it was already too late. He had already fallen into the control of Chen Zong. Unless Empyrean Shunguang was also an ultimate Empyrean, he could not avoid this sword. The blood-red sword light arrived in an instant. The void was cut open, and a huge and long hole appeared. It rushed towards the horrified Shunguang Tianzuan. Suddenly, the layers of divine light defense were cut open, and the layers were cut apart. When the layers of divine light defense were broken, the power of the sword was almost exhausted. Empyrean Shunguang was, after all, a peak Empyrean master. He tried his best to erupt, but he could barely block this sword. However, the real power of Blood Shura's secret sword was not the sword light. It was just a prelude. Its real power was to seal the void. With the blood-red shadow, the void of thousands of meters would be sealed. It was as if it was solidified. The wind stopped and the clouds stopped. It constantly emitted a tyrannical killing intent to attack the target, shake the target's divine will, and intimidate the target. Under the power of Blood Shura, even opponents at the same level as Chen Zong would be affected, not to mention those who were not as strong as Chen Zong. Empyrean Shunguang was now obviously affected. Secret of concealing Yuan in the void. In an instant, a fist-sized dark vortex suddenly appeared behind Chen Zong. It spun endlessly, swallowing and spitting out tyrannical power into Chen Zong's body. Immediately, Chen Zong's mixed Yuan heart force, which was almost exhausted, was quickly restored. With the replenishment, Chen Zong's cultivation recovered and immediately erupted 10 times. Shinxiao. A sword that took away all the light in the world and fell into darkness. Everyone only felt that the originally dazzling and bright sky seemed to have suddenly fallen into darkness. Even the divine light emitted by Empyrean Shunguang was swallowed up. In an instant, an extremely bright brilliance suddenly lit up, making everyone unconsciously close their eyes. They could not stare at it. Otherwise, they would feel as if their eyes were being cut apart. It was extremely painful. Shinxiao's sword that erupted 10 times the power was extremely terrifying. Suddenly, the blood of Empyrean Shunguang was cut in half. The terrible sword aura was raging endlessly. Taihao. The incomparably strong light rose. It was like an ancient sun that burned incessantly, incinerating everything. It directly bombarded the body of Empyrean Shunguang. Empyrean Shunguang had originally been in a fierce battle. Nearly half of his cultivation strength had been consumed. Then, he withstood Chen Zong's Blood Shura, which consumed a lot of his cultivation strength. Then, he was cut in half by Shinxiao's sword. His cultivation strength was almost depleted. The final Taihao sword directly determined the outcome of the battle, life and death. Death. From the beginning, Emperor Shenguang had fallen into Chunzong's rhythm. He was controlled by Chunzong invisibly. After killing Emperor Shenguang, Chunzong immediately took out his opponent's Heaven Soul. After destroying his corpse, he displayed the secret sword of limitless formless kill and broke out with extreme speed to escape. Everyone only felt darkness descending. The light flashed. First it was a ray, then a ball. Then, when the darkness dissipated, calm was restored. There was no one in the sky. Where is he? Where is Emperor Shenguang? And the strong man who called himself Emperor Sword Master? They could not find him. The others at most had the strength of a heavenly king realm. The gap between them and the Emperorian realm was obvious. How could they discover the whereabouts of Chunzong? They had already disappeared. As for the result of this battle, no one knew at present. It was better this way. Chunzong escaped far away and found a remote valley to land. His aura was instantly restrained. Heaven's Soul. A Heaven's Soul appeared in Chunzong's hand. The aura it exuded was stronger than that of Emperor Chang He's Heaven's Soul. It was at least twice as strong. This was the Heaven's Soul of Emperor Shenguang. It was the Heaven's Soul of a top Emperor. On the other hand, Emperor Chang, he was only an ordinary Emperor. The difference in strength was obvious. The power contained in the Heaven's Soul was also obvious. Looking at this Heaven's Soul and feeling the strong aura fluctuations contained in it, Chunzong was very excited. It should be able to upgrade the ancient god sword armor to King Realm, Chunzong said to himself. Refine. He immediately used the ancient god armor refining technique and started to refine this stronger cauldron soul. The pure power within the cauldron soul was immediately sucked out and swallowed by the ancient god sword armor. The ancient god sword armor gradually shone brighter and brighter. In the end, it turned into a dark golden sun that shone in all directions. Aura. The tyrannical aura continued to rise. It became more and more shocking. Chunzong's body floated in midair. The aura he exuded rushed in all directions. It was overbearing, ancient, and heavy. It caused the surrounding void to distort and collapse. It affected the kernel. The call seemed to be constantly gnawed and swallowed by invisible sawteeth. It kept disappearing. Depression. The call completely disappeared. It formed a depression that was hundreds of meters wide. Gradually, as time passed, the power of the top Emperorian Heaven Soul was completely swallowed up by the ancient god sword armor. The power of the ancient god sword armor was raised to the limit of the general realm. However, it still did not break through. It's not that I don't have enough power. It's that I need to control this power. Only then can I truly upgrade to the King Realm. Chunzong suddenly realized something. This power was extremely tyrannical. It increased from 6 times to 9 times. There was a faint feeling that it was out of his control. Once it was out of control, it would go out of control. Once it went out of control, it would definitely explode. When that happened, it would cause great damage to him. He absolutely could not lose control. Chunzong immediately exerted the wholehearted chaotic prime realm to the limit. He did not dare to hold back at all. He went all out. Control. He constantly controlled this tyrannical power. The boundless dark golden light, which was like an ancient blazing sun, began to shrink and converge little by little. This was a sign that Chunzong was slowly gaining control of it. Fortunately, although the entire process continued, it did not cause any disturbances. Gradually, Chunzong gained complete control of it. The dark golden light was completely withdrawn, revealing the ancient god sword armor, which had also undergone a drastic change. Black. The main color of the ancient god sword armor had become black. It was so black that it looked very simple, ancient, and profound. Above the black, there were dark golden lines. The mysterious dark golden lines crisscrossed and seemed to outline the outline of an ancient god. It was extremely mysterious. If a soldier-level ancient god armor was a piece of rough iron, then a general-level ancient god armor was a piece of fine iron, and a king-level ancient god armor was a piece of refined steel that had been polished. Anyone who saw this king-level ancient god armor would immediately know that it was extraordinary. A treasure. No matter how one looked at it, it was a treasure. Although it was very conspicuous and eye-catching, the power it possessed was extremely astonishing. This power was also very restrained, making it difficult for people to sense it clearly. Only Chen Zong knew this power best. If one were to calculate it in terms of multiples, the king-level ancient god armor could increase one's strength, speed, and defense tenfold. It could also form an extremely tyrannical layer of divine will protection. Powerful. Equipped with the king-level ancient god sword armor, Chen Zong felt that his strength had more than doubled. It had reached an astonishing height, an extremely tyrannical height. He felt as if he could pluck stars from the sky and capture dragons from the sea. It was as if there was nothing in the world that could stop him. Chapter 33:18. King Level. Chen Zong had finally upgraded the ancient god's sword armor to king level. Its power had increased tremendously, making it extremely powerful. 10 times the power, 10 times the speed, 10 times the defense, and 10 times the defense. The stronger Chen Zong's divine intent was, the stronger the defense was. This meant that if one wanted to use divine intent to attack Chen Zong's divine intent, the strength of the divine intent had to be at least much stronger than Chen Zong's. It could be said that with the king-level ancient god sword armor, Chen Zong's strength had more than doubled. He had become even more powerful. Of course, he was still in the limit transcendent saint realm. However, he had only just entered the limit transcendent saint realm. Now, he was at the top of the limit transcendent saint realm. Power. Tyrannical power surged endlessly. The ancient god's sword armor was closely connected to his bloodline. Not long after, Chen Zong put away the ancient god's sword armor and turned it into a layer of black gold fluid that covered his bones. Even after putting away the ancient god's sword armor, Chen Zong's body still exuded a powerful aura. Double. When the ancient god sword armor was upgraded from general level to king level, it was also because the ancient god sword armor was closely connected to Chen Zong's bloodline. Chen Zong's cosmic immortal body had also been strengthened. The double increase made Chen Zong's cosmic immortal body even more powerful. When he clenched his fist, there was a loud bang immediately. It was as if he could crush a mountain and punch through the sky. Very powerful. Although he was not a physique cultivator, the cosmic immortal body was already very powerful. After repeated refinements, it became even more powerful. Now, it had reached a very shocking level. With the cosmic immortal body alone, I should be able to fight against a top devil king. Chen Zong could not help but think to himself with a smile on his face. He could fight against a top devil king just by relying on his physique without using his cultivation. How amazing was that! The indestructible body of the universe had more than doubled, and the mixed origin heart force had also improved. Its purity had increased by 30%, which meant that the power of the mixed origin heart force had become even more tyrannical. In essence, it had further enhanced Chen Zong's strength. Now, without the ancient divine sword armor, experts like Heavenly Master Long River were no longer a match for Chen Zong. Of course, it was still impossible to kill experts like Heavenly Master Long River without the ancient divine sword armor. They could only suppress them. Since the ancient god sword armor has been upgraded to the king level, then the next step is to obtain another heavenly soul, Chen Zong said to himself. His eyes shone brightly. He wanted to give another heavenly soul to demigod Digio to complete his deal with him. Of course, if conditions permitted, Chen Zong would not mind obtaining more heavenly souls. Other than the heavenly souls, he also wanted to obtain the heavenly bloodline. An ordinary heavenly bloodline had to be handed over to the Sky Heart Holy Court. That was the rule. Other bloodlines could be sold for divine origin. The value of divine origin was amazing, and he could use it to buy resources that were useful to him. Where is the third heavenly master? Chenzong said to himself. His body flashed, and he immediately turned into a fine sword light. In an instant, he pierced through the air and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Heavenly Master Long River had died, but because he had died in the Water Mansion, no one knew about it. Whether Heavenly Master Shen Guang had died or not was still unknown. In a short time, the news had not spread. Chen Zong inquired about the other heavenly masters while looking for heavenly bloodlines. Heavenly bloodlines were the same as demon bloodlines. They were divided into ordinary, elite, top, and supreme. The higher the level of the bloodline, the rarer it was and the harder it was to obtain. Chen Zong also did not have any ideas about supreme bloodlines. That was very difficult to obtain. It would be good enough if he could obtain a top bloodline. He casually suppressed a top heavenly king realm cultivator, and then used the bloodline extraction technique to extract a heavenly bloodline from the top heavenly king realm cultivator's body. This was an elite-level bloodline that was worth 30 divine origin. Chenzong quickly put it away. Chenzong didn't deliberately hunt because he had a feeling that seemed to come from the underworld, that he couldn't go on a killing spree. Otherwise, it would bring about a terrible disaster. Whether there were any heavenly god realm cultivators in the Divine Radiance dynasty was still unknown. Even if they had not appeared before, it did not mean that they did not exist. The heavenly god realm was equivalent to the demigod realm. Its power was shocking and unpredictable. Splendid palaces were located on the ground. They stretched in all directions and were arranged in picturesque disorder. The position of each palace seemed messy, but they were actually very particular. They formed a mysterious pattern. The pattern seemed to be solidified on the ground, but it also seemed to be connected to the sky. As the auras intertwined, it was like a dragon hiding in the abyss. This was where the imperial family of the Divine Radiance dynasty was located. The palaces were incomparably splendid. Together they formed a great array that connected the heavens and the earth, enveloped and protected all the palaces. They depended on each other for survival. Under normal circumstances, such a great array would be in a half-activated state. Its energy consumption would be very low, but its defensive ability was not weak at all. It was enough to block the attacks of ordinary heavenly venerables without breaking. If it was fully activated, it could even trap and kill ordinary heavenly venerables and resist the attacks of top heavenly venerables. Even if an ultimate heavenly venerate wanted to break through it, it would not be that easy. It would take some time. Such a great array was really shocking. Only the imperial family, which was so powerful and had such a deep foundation, could possess it. Although the second-ranked force was also very strong, its great array was at most at the level of ordinary heavenly venerables. It could not reach the level of top heavenly venerables. At this moment it was night. The stars were dotted with stars. A few of them were especially bright. Their light shone in all directions, giving people the feeling of a scorching sun. A person was standing on a 1,000-meter-tall platform in the imperial family. He looked up at the sky and stared at the stars. This 1,000-meter-tall platform was called the stargazing platform. It was used to observe the stars and know the rise, fall, and changes of the stars. The person standing on the stargazing platform was an old man. He was an old man with white hair and a white beard. His eyes seemed turbid, but they were actually very bright, clear, and penetrating. The old man was surrounded by mysterious fluctuations. His aura was obscure and deep, but it was also as high as the starry sky. If Chenzong saw it, he would be surprised. This old man was a top heavenly venerate expert, a top heavenly venerate with an extraordinary bloodline. The old man observed the night sky and suddenly realized that 2 stars were missing. The 2 stars were very bright. He was startled and quickly pinched his fingers to calculate. As soon as he calculated, he immediately felt an indescribable murderous intent attack him. The murderous intent was so strong, so sudden, and so frightening. Even with the strength of a top heavenly venerate, he could not help but feel his hair stand on end. When he looked again, it seemed that the few shining stars in the night sky were gradually suffused with a layer of blood color, quietly spreading like a thin mist. Only this old man had such a sign. To be able to see it, this was the ability of his unique bloodline. Without hesitation, the old man immediately sent a message. Soon, a ray of light streaked across the night sky and descended on the stargazing platform, revealing a stalwart figure. This stalwart figure was wearing platinum armor and a long cape. The cape was red and covered with fragmented gold patterns. It fluttered in the night wind like a war flag. "Great Emperor!" The old man hurriedly bowed slightly to the newcomer. "Elder, there's no need to be so polite," the stalwart figure immediately replied. "Elder, if you have any discoveries, please specially send me a message." "Great Emperor, I observed the night sky and found that a calamity is coming." The old man did not waste any time and went straight to the point. His expression was solemn, and there was a hint of fear in his eyes. What calamity? The stalwart figure was the Divine Brilliance Great Emperor of the Divine Brilliance dynasty. When he heard this, he immediately asked in a serious tone. This old man was at the level of an elder. He was the only one left, and his bloodline was unique. He could observe the stars and deduce the rise and fall of the dynasty, and so on. Since he observed the sky and said that a calamity was coming, then a calamity was really coming to the Divine Brilliance dynasty. "This calamity is a killing calamity," the old man said in a serious tone. The old man's tone was extremely solemn as he said, "I can see that this calamity is coming. Many experts will die in it. Great Emperor, if I'm not wrong, 2 heavenly venerables should have died in the killing calamity by now," the elder said with an extremely serious expression. This shocked the Divine Brilliance Great Emperor, and his expression changed drastically. 2 heavenly venerables. How many heavenly venerables were there in the Divine Brilliance dynasty? There were only a few dozen, and 2 of them had died in an instant. What a huge loss it was! Most importantly, this was only the beginning of this killing calamity. If this continued, it was very likely that even more heavenly venerables would die. This was absolutely not allowed. He was the ruler of the Divine Brilliance dynasty, the Divine Brilliance Great Emperor. The other heavenly venerables were all citizens and subjects of the Divine Brilliance dynasty. How could they die just like that? "Elder Su, please deduce the exact source of the killing calamity," the Divine Brilliance Great Emperor said with a cold voice and a stern expression. No matter who it was, anyone who dared to start a killing calamity in his dynasty had to die. "Yes, Great Emperor." After Elder Su responded, he immediately focused and activated his extraordinary and unique bloodline to the extreme. Bits of starlight emanated from his body and floated in the surroundings. It was as if the stars in the night sky were responding to each other from afar. Every bit of starlight flickered endlessly, emanating an incomparably mysterious aura fluctuation. The Divine Brilliance Great Emperor waited quietly at the side, waiting for Elder Su to deduce the result. His aura was restrained and steady, and an extremely tyrannical power surged continuously within his body. It was as if an ancient volcano was constantly accumulating power and was about to erupt. Who exactly was it? Who dared to start a killing calamity in the Divine Brilliance dynasty? Was it a powerful cultivator from outside the dynasty? However, no matter where this powerful cultivator came from or if he was a powerful cultivator from the dynasty itself, starting a killing calamity was absolutely not allowed. Just as Elder Su was using all his power to deduce, another speck of starlight suddenly flickered. It flickered somewhat hurriedly, and traces of blood red permeated the air and gradually multiplied. It was as if the speck of starlight was about to be dyed scarlet. As it flickered, the light of that star also dimmed bit by bit. Chapter 33:19 Heavenly Venerable Sacred Flame. This was Chun Zong's third target, an ordinary heavenly venerable. Demigod Dijiu required a demonic soul and a heavenly soul, but he did not require a demonic soul or a heavenly soul. In that case, an ordinary heavenly venerable was also acceptable. It would be easier for Chun Zong to kill an ordinary heavenly venerable. Even if the other party was prepared, they would not be able to stop Chun Zong. Moreover, Chun Zong's actions were as secretive as possible. Heavenly Venerable Sacred Flame was the patriarch of the Sacred Fire sect. It was because of Heavenly Venerable Sacred Flame's existence that the Sacred Fire sect could continue to develop and grow. Now, it was one of the few powerful forces in the Divine Radiance dynasty. There was an extremely ancient volcano in the territory of the Sacred Fire sect. This volcano was 9,000 meters tall and spanned hundreds of miles. It constantly spat out white flames. A long time ago, it was called the White Volcano. Later, it was occupied by Heavenly Venerable Sacred Flame and was renamed the Sacred Volcano. The white flames of the Sacred Volcano were more terrifying than ordinary volcanic flames. Its temperature was more than 10 times higher. Once Heavenly Lord Realm experts got close, they would feel uncomfortable and would feel like they were being roasted dry. Heavenly generals could not get close, or they would be roasted dry in a short time. Only Heavenly King Realm experts could withstand the shocking heat of the Sacred Volcano. The Sacred Volcano was also the place where Heavenly Venerable Sacred Flame cultivated in seclusion. The sword light traversed the sky at an extremely fast speed. It flew without stopping in the direction of the Sacred Volcano. The figure in the sword light was Chun Zong. His target was Heavenly Venerable Sacred Flame, who was cultivating in seclusion in the Sacred Volcano. Chun Zong had already found out that Heavenly Venerable Sacred Flame was an ordinary Heavenly Venerable. His bloodline was closely related to fire. No matter what, the strength of an ordinary Heavenly Venerable was almost at the level of Heavenly Venerable Chong He. If he faced Chun Zong, who was armed with the ancient divine sword armor, he would not be a match at all. It's a pity that the King-grade ancient divine sword armor's consumption of cultivation power has increased. Chun Zong sighed as he flew. The general-grade ancient divine sword armor consumed twice as much cultivation as the soldier-grade ancient divine sword armor. However, the king-grade ancient divine sword armor consumed twice as much cultivation as the general-grade ancient divine sword armor. This meant that Chun Zong's cultivation base could not sustain the king-grade ancient divine sword armor for much longer. Chun Zong tried to make some speculations and found that if he went all out, he could only sustain the king-grade ancient divine sword armor for half a minute. And this was without using the mixed Yuan heart force. Fortunately, I obtained the void energy concealment secret from the ancestral land. Chun Zong was even more delighted that he had obtained the void energy concealment secret. Without the void energy concealment secret, the king-grade ancient divine sword armor would be like a trump card to him. He could only use it at a critical moment. After all, half a minute was too short. If he used the mixed Yuan heart force, he could only use it for a quarter of an hour. However, the void energy concealment art could open up the void acupoint. One void acupoint could store all of one's cultivation, and 2 void acupoints were equivalent to 2 more cultivation. The more void acupoints there were, the more cultivation they could store. Therefore, the king-grade ancient divine sword armor could be used as a regular method. The sky was vast and the sword light was flying. Chen Zong finally saw a huge mountain standing between the heavens and the earth. White flames were constantly spewing out from the top of the mountain, turning into wisps of white sparks that sputtered and fell in all directions. These sparks contained an astonishingly high temperature. If a heavenly general came into contact with them, he would most likely be burned to death. He had finally arrived at the sacred volcano. Chen Zong's expression was cold. His aura was completely restrained. The sword light also dimmed and became even more inconspicuous. There was a cluster of palaces 1,000 kilometers away from the sacred fire mountain. They were enveloped by a great formation, and strands of fire chi could be vaguely seen rising. It was like a huge, invisible furnace, protecting the cluster of palaces firmly against external enemies. This large formation was able to resist external attacks. At the same time, it was also able to continuously gather the blazing aura from all directions and gather it in the sacred fire gate, turning it into pure sacred fire aura for the disciples of the sacred fire gate to absorb. This allowed them to better cultivate and improve their cultivation base and strength. Although Chen Zong did not specialize in formations, he had a certain foundation in formations. Coupled with his vast knowledge and sharp senses, he could more or less deduce the mysteries of the sacred fire gate's large formation. It was indeed a powerful force. It was also worthy of being the cultivation legacy of the heavenly human tribe. It was indeed unique and brilliant. However, Chen Zong's target was not the sacred fire gate but the sacred fire heavenly venerables. As for the sacred fire gate, if there was a brilliant bloodline, it was not impossible to refine some of it. After locking onto the sacred volcano in the distance, Chen Zong rapidly approached. The mixed Yuan heart force was also constantly dispersed and spread out. After the battle with heavenly venerable Chang He, Chen Zong knew that although his mixed Yuan heart force was hidden, heavenly venerables could still sense it. Therefore, he tried his best to thin out the mixed Yuan heart force. In his perception, there was a restrained aura in the sacred volcano. That aura was very tyrannical. It was fine if it did not erupt. However, once it did, its power was vast and would definitely destroy mountains and shatter heaven and earth. No, it was not just one aura but two. There are actually two heavenly venerables auras. Chen Zong narrowed his eyes slightly. One heavenly venerable and two heavenly venerables were two different concepts. It was not difficult to kill an ordinary heavenly venerable. However, if it was two ordinary heavenly venerables, the difficulty would be a little high. Chen Zong's thoughts turned, but he did not plan to give up. It was not difficult to kill two ordinary heavenly venerables when he unleashed his full power. Moreover, he was originally only looking for the sacred fire heavenly venerables. He did not expect to have one more heavenly soul. After carefully sensing the power of the sacred volcano, Chen Zong decided to barge in directly. Armed. In an instant, a dark golden fluid flowed out of his body and covered his entire body. It turned into a dark golden battle armor that completely covered his head and body. Only his eyes were exposed. However, even where his eyes were, there was a layer of invisible defense. As soon as the king-level ancient god sword armor was equipped, Chen Zong immediately felt that the power flowing in his body was extremely tyrannical. It seemed that as long as it was released, it could shatter heaven and earth and shatter the vacuum. His speed was at its peak. He directly appeared on the sacred volcano and stared at the huge hole below that was constantly spewing out white flames. Charge! Without hesitation, Chen Zong immediately rushed into the sacred volcano. Even if the sacred fire heavenly venerable's battle strength was even more tyrannical in the sacred volcano, it could not make Chen Zong retreat at all. Strength. This was confidence in his own strength. Who is it? A violent roar suddenly sounded, full of anger. The sacred fire heavenly venerable was not a good-tempered person. On the contrary, he was very fiery. In the face of an outsider, he immediately became angry, followed by a terrifying sharp cry. It was not a heavenly venerable, but an ordinary heavenly venerable phoenix. This phoenix was the heavenly fire sacred phoenix that had lived at the bottom of the sacred volcano in its early years. After being subdued by the sacred fire heavenly venerable, it had been nurtured with all his heart. As they grew together, it had also reached the level of an ordinary heavenly venerable. The sacred fire heavenly venerable and the heavenly fire sacred phoenix were both at the heavenly venerable level. This made the top battle strength of the sacred fire sect even more astonishing. At the foot of the sacred volcano, there was a huge white lava lake that covered hundreds of miles. Above it, 100-meter-long platinum phoenix soared endlessly. Layers of white flames burned on its body. In an instant, the Skyfire sacred phoenix let out an extremely high-pitched cry. It suddenly spread its wings and blasted a ball of platinum flames at Chunzong. The flames were extremely scorching and burned everything. It also contained a domineering power, as if it wanted to shatter everything without mercy. The sacred fire heavenly venerable also attacked at the same time. He slapped his palm across the sky. The sacred fire great palm contained an extremely tyrannical and blazing power and bombarded across the sky. In just one exchange, Chunzong suffered 2 terrifying attacks and was under great threat. If Chunzong was just an ordinary heavenly venerable, it would be difficult for him to bear. This was because in the environment of the sacred volcano, the sacred fire heavenly venerable's attack power would increase by 30%. The Skyfire sacred phoenix's strength would also increase by 30%. If they joined forces, they would be able to contend against a top-level heavenly venerable. Chunzong was not an ordinary heavenly venerable, nor was he a top-level heavenly venerable. He was an ultimate heavenly venerable, and a top-level one at that. His strength was so strong that it was difficult to find an opponent in the Divine Brilliance Empire. Facing the combined attack of the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix and the Sacred Fire Heavenly Venerable, Chunzong's expression did not change. There was no fluctuation in his eyes. His figure flashed, and he turned into a sword light that pierced through the sky. The Heavenly Will Sword was also unsheathed in an instant. Slash. The sword light tore through the sky as if it was splitting the heavens and the earth. It split the ball of platinum flames that the Skyfire's sacred phoenix spat out. It was like a hot knife through butter. It was unstoppable. The power of the platinum flames was very strong and shocking. However, under the absolute difference in strength, all power was ignored and destroyed. Shen Shao. Chunzong's plan was to end the battle as soon as possible. He wanted to end the battle as quickly as possible to prevent any unnecessary changes from occurring. Under Shen Zhao's sword, the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix was immediately split apart. Its 100-meter-long body could not withstand the sharpness of the sword. After being split apart, the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix immediately let out a roar. As its power surged, the severed part of its body closed up again. However, it had used up a lot of its power. Slash after slash at the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix and the Sacred Fire Heavenly Venerable. Immediately, a blood-red light flashed in Chunzong's eyes. The moment the blood-red light appeared, an obscure aura spread out. It enveloped the sacred fire mountain for hundreds of miles at an astonishing speed. The bubbling white lava lake also stopped in an instant, as if it had frozen. A blood-red shadow appeared on Chunzong's body. It exuded an unparalleled and terrifying killing aura. It was as if it had crossed over from the abyss of slaughter. Blood Shura. Once this secret art was used, both the Sacred Fire Heavenly Venerable and the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix immediately felt that they were suppressed by an extremely terrifying power. Their auras became obscure and it became difficult for them to mobilize their power. The blood-red sword light tore through the sky, bringing with it the massacre supremacy as it charged towards the Sacred Fire Heavenly Venerable. It split him apart without any resistance. Kill. Under the attack and suppression of the Blood Shura, the Sacred Fire Heavenly Venerable and the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix were no match for it. They did not even have the ability to fight back. Chapter 33:20. In the Sacred Fire Mountain, everything was calm. The white magma seemed to have completely frozen like a mirror. The Sacred Flame Heavenly Lord and the Heavenly Fire Sacred Phoenix had become two corpses, and their souls had been taken by Chunzong. Refine. Chunzong immediately used the bloodline refining secret art. Wisps of blood spread out, turning into a bloody light that sprinkled on the Heavenly Fire Sacred Phoenix's corpse, immediately refining its bloodline. The Heavenly Fire Sacred Phoenix was a beast, not a celestial being. Therefore, it was different from the celestial being. A celestial being at the celestial being level would have their bloodline essence integrated into their souls and could not be refined. However, beasts were different. When they advanced to the celestial being level, they would not condense their souls, but their bloodline would sublimate, and they could still be refined. The Heavenly Fire Sacred Phoenix was at the celestial being level, and its bloodline had been raised to the extremity level. After it was killed, some of it was lost. Therefore, the bloodline that was refined was at the top level. Not long after, a mini dragon appeared in Chunzong's hand. The Heavenly Fire Sacred Phoenix, about 2 fingers long, was swimming in Chunzong's palm, emitting a strong power. The top-level Heavenly Fire Sacred Phoenix's bloodline was also very valuable. It was not inferior to the top-level Eternal Darkness Tree's bloodline that he had previously obtained. With a flip of his hand, Chunzong immediately put away the Heavenly Fire Sacred Phoenix's bloodline and soul. Chunzong immediately smiled. Now that he had obtained what he needed, it was time to leave. First, he had killed Empyrean Long River. Then, he had killed Empyrean Xinguang. Now, he had killed Empyrean Sacred Flame. However, Chunzong had not been implanted with a bloodline curse like when he had killed Shu Muyuan in the Dark Sky Empire. A bloodline curse seal was often a special technique that could not be used by any bloodline. In essence, the bloodline of the Eternal Tree of Darkness was one of the best demonic person bloodlines, and it was also an extremely special demonic person bloodline. In terms of essence, the bloodlines of Empyrean Long River, Empyrean Xinguang, and Empyrean Sacred Flame could not compare. It was a good thing that he was not implanted with a bloodline curse seal. Chunzong did not like that thing on him. It's time to leave. Chunzong thought to himself. Even though he could continue to stay and kill other heavenly souls to obtain heavenly souls and search for superior bloodlines to refine, he could exchange them for divine energy that he could not use. Furthermore, divine energy could be used to purchase many treasures and resources. However, Chunzong still felt a sense of danger in his heart. The longer he stayed here, the greater the danger. After all, the purpose of staying here was to hunt more, and the more he hunted, the more attention he would attract. If he didn't continue hunting, then there was no point in staying here. Quit while you're ahead, Chunzong said to himself. He immediately rushed out of the holy volcano and was about to leave. When Chunzong rushed out of the sacred fire mountain and flew into the distance, the white lava lake in the calm sacred fire mountain immediately began to churn violently. It was like a raging tidal wave that surged higher and higher, engulfing the corpses of the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix and Heavenly Lord Sacred Flame. Rumble! Waves of terrifying rumbling sounds rang out from the sacred fire mountain. They were extremely dull, like the beating of war drums. The mighty sounds continued to spread out, rushing in all directions. The entire sacred fire mountain immediately began to shake. The Sacred Fire School, which was thousands of miles away, did not know that their patriarch had fallen. They only sensed the abnormal fluctuations in the sacred fire mountain, but did not take it to heart. After all, their patriarch was cultivating in seclusion in the sacred fire mountain. Any movement was probably due to their patriarch. Even if the sacred fire mountain were to erupt, their patriarch would be able to suppress it. There was no need to worry. However, things were progressing beyond their expectations. Unexpectedly, for some reason, their patriarch did not take action. The sacred fire mountain erupted. Terrifying white lava spewed out from the sacred fire mountain and soared into the sky. It reached a height of thousands of meters before quickly spreading and falling, covering all directions. Rumble! 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 The entire sacred fire mountain trembled. Endless white lava spewed out like raging waves and rolled down, covering a radius of thousands of miles. It was as though a natural disaster had descended. The sacred fire school was directly impacted. Block it, quickly block it. What's going on? Where's the patriarch? Inside the sacred fire school, the expressions of the sect master and the elders changed drastically. They immediately activated the formation with all their might and personally blocked the impact of the sacred fire mountain's lava. What about their patriarch? Where was the patriarch? He had long been killed. Sword light flew in the sky. Chernzong, who was inside the sword light, suddenly frowned. At that moment, he felt his heart palpitate for no reason, as if some danger was approaching. This feeling was mysterious and indescribable. However, it was a kind of perception that originated from the depths of one's soul. It was a perception that came from the depths of one's soul. Danger was approaching, and it could even threaten one's life. Chernzong increased his speed and immediately flew into the distance. Since even he felt that the danger was great, there was no need to face it. He would avoid it if he could. After all, this was the world of the heavenly human race. If his identity was exposed, the danger would increase. However, it was a pity that Chernzong did not manage to escape in the end. A white warship that seemed to be burning with a layer of sacred flames burst out at an astonishing speed, surging through the sky. Every time it shuttled, it would directly cross tens of thousands of miles. It was so fast that even the full speed of an ultimate heavenly master could not compare with it. Chernzong was indeed very fast at full speed, but he still could not compare with the speed of the warship. Under the locking of the aura, he was also caught up. He could not escape. Since he could not escape, he would look for an opportunity. The warship flashed, and directly shot out a beam of sacred white divine light from the dragon head at the bow of the warship. Its speed was astonishing, and it instantly shattered the sky and blasted toward Chernzong. An extremely strong aura locked onto Chernzong, making Chernzong feel a sense of horror. If he was hit, he would definitely be injured. Chernzong's figure flashed, and he immediately dodged. Then, figures flew out of the warship at an astonishing speed and immediately flew in all directions. As if they were pillars of heaven, their auras surrounded each other and directly sealed the surroundings. 4 of them, a total of 4 heavenly masters, worked together to set up a formation, as if sealing off the sky and locking down the earth. Chernzong was in the middle of it. Chernzong looked dignified. With his super-strong perception, he was able to perceive the aura emitted by the 4 figures. Heavenly Masters. They were 4 Heavenly Master-level experts. Even if they were just ordinary Heavenly Masters, it was still very shocking to have 4 of them. However, Chernzong was actually not worried about 4 ordinary Heavenly Masters. If he fully unleashed his strength, he could easily defeat them, and it would not be difficult for him to escape. Even if the opponents set up a formation, Chernzong was confident that he could break it. What really made Chernzong fearful was the figure that walked over from the warship. It was an imposing figure dressed in platinum armor. The armor covered every part of his body and was burning with a faint layer of flames. Behind him was a long cloak. That was the figure. The cloak had a red base, and there were many fragmentary golden lines on it. It looked very shocking. The cloak constantly fluttered behind him, exuding a shocking power. Chernzong was inwardly shocked by such power. Who was this? This aura was much stronger than that of Divine Light Heavenly Master. It was definitely an ultimate Heavenly Master. Who are you? The divine brilliance great emperor, who was clad in platinum armor, spoke. His voice carried a kind of supreme majesty, as if he was the ruler of the world and commanding all living things. That kind of majesty transformed into a terrifying might that directly pressed down on Chernzong. Who are you? Chernzong asked in return. How dare you not bow when you see the great emperor? An ordinary heavenly master suddenly rebuked angrily. Chernzong was shocked when he heard that. Great emperor? What great emperor? With such power and the title of great emperor, it had to be the divine brilliance great emperor of the divine brilliance dynasty. Sure enough, it was no wonder that he was the top cultivator of the divine brilliance dynasty. His power was really extremely powerful and shocking. It was simply terrifying. Once, in the great dark sky empire in the ruins of the demonic universe epoch, the strongest cultivator there was the lord of the great dark sky. However, at that time, Chernzong's strength was far from what it was now. In the end, he was only an ordinary demon emperor, and it was still very difficult. Naturally, he could not see such a strong cultivator like the lord of the great dark sky with his own eyes. Strength determined one's level, and to a certain extent, it also determined one's experience. Seeing the divine brilliance great emperor and feeling his powerful aura, Chernzong felt a surge of excitement from the depths of his heart for no reason. It was an indescribable excitement, the excitement of seeing a strong cultivator. You dare to start a massacre in the dynasty. No matter where you come from, you must die. The divine brilliance great emperor was furious. In his anger, an extremely shocking fluctuation immediately erupted from his body. Sacred pale flames burned wildly and soared into the sky as if to burn everything. The void around him was also distorted under the burning of these pale sacred flames, turning into a terrifying vacuum. With a boom, a flood dragon condensed from the pale sacred flames instantly took shape. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it tore through the air toward Chernzong. That terrifying power directly locked onto Chernzong as if to swallow Chernzong whole. It was tyrannical and unavoidable. That kind of domineering will had reached the extreme. It was as if everything in heaven and earth had to submit to him. He drew his sword. Slash. The sword light pierced through the air. Chernzong's forte was not in dodging, but in attacking. Attack against attack. The moment the sword light struck the flood dragon, it immediately shattered. The flood dragon paused for a moment and then collapsed directly. But in the next breath, it was guided by a mysterious force and turned into a huge dragon claw, burning with endless pale flames. It viciously tore through the air toward Chernzong. The trajectory of that claw was extremely mysterious, as if it was in accordance with some kind of mystery between heaven and earth. It gave Chernzong a feeling that he could not avoid it no matter what. Since he could not avoid it, then he would not. Slash. The sword light flashed and collided with the dragon claw. In just a short moment, they had clashed hundreds of times. Every time they clashed, there was a burst of terrifying power and sparks sputtered. Chernzong clearly felt that a terrible power pervaded from the dragon claw, as if to destroy the heavenly will sword and then destroy his own body. That power was blazing, boundless, and contained a kind of astonishing domineering power. However, that was not the true essence of this power. Its true essence was a purifying power, a power that wanted to purify everything. The purifying power seemed sacred, but in fact, it was extremely domineering and full of destruction. Chapter 33:21. The power of purification looked wholly on the surface as if it could dispel all filth, but its essence was destruction. Purification and destruction were two sides of the same coin, but their essence was the same. It was just that the aura of purification and destruction were different. To some extent, purification was more terrifying than direct destruction. If not for the heavenly will sword's tyrannical nature, it would have been damaged by this overbearing purification power. In his heart, Chen Zong was more and more shocked by the strength of the Divine Brilliance Great Emperor. Little did he know that the Divine Brilliance Great Emperor was also shocked by Chen Zong's strength. Very strong. To think that this person was able to block his attack. Although it wasn't his full strength, this level of strength wasn't something that a peak Empyrean could possess. Judging from the might of his attack, this person in full dark golden armor should be an ultimate Empyrean like himself. Of course, the Divine Brilliance Great Emperor was not the only ultimate heavenly venerable in the Divine Brilliance dynasty, but there were actually only 3. One of them was the Divine Brilliance Great Emperor, and the other was the Great Elder of the Divine Brilliance dynasty. However, he had been in seclusion for many years to break through to the heavenly god realm and had not appeared for thousands of years. As for the third ultimate heavenly venerable, the Divine Brilliance Great Emperor knew him. He was not the person in front of him at all. So, where did this person come from? The Divine Brilliance Great Emperor did not continue to attack. Instead, he stared at Chen Zong and asked again, "Who are you?" "My name is Supreme Heavenly Light." Chen Zong gave a false name. Supreme Heavenly Light. The Divine Brilliance Great Emperor pondered for a moment, and with some uncertainty, he asked, "Did you come from the ruins of God?" Chen Zong's expression did not change, but his heart trembled slightly. Ruins of God. This was the first time he had heard such a name, so combining all the information he could speculate that the ruins of God must be located outside the Divine Brilliance dynasty. It was a mysterious and powerful place. In other words, the Divine Brilliance dynasty was not the only Divine Brilliance dynasty in this fragment of the celestial epoch of the universe. Chen Zong could not help but think of the Great Dark Sky Empire. Was there something like the ruins of God outside the Great Dark Sky Empire? The thought flashed through his mind, but Chen Zong did not intend to investigate further. For the Heavenly Heart dynasty, the ruins of God should be a realm that had not yet been explored, and he had no plans to explore it now. "You don't need to know that much." Chen Zong's voice was cold and harsh. He replied rudely, "If you want to fight, then fight. If not, I'll take my leave." With that, Chen Zong was about to leave. The Divine Brilliance Heavenly Emperor was instantly enraged. Originally, he had not planned to continue attacking because the other party was also an ultimate heavenly venerable. Instead, he wanted to first understand the other party's background and the purpose of entering the Divine Brilliance dynasty. He did not expect that the other party would be so unappreciative. Since that was the case, he might as well leave his life behind. Enraged, the Divine Brilliance Great Emperor did not hold back at all. His right hand grabbed at the void beside him, as if reaching into the depths of the void. The void fluctuated incessantly, like a raging undercurrent of the divine sea. A blazing ball of sacred pale flames burned incessantly, spewing out from the depths of the void. Under Chen Zong's gaze, the Divine Brilliance Great Emperor's right hand pulled out a ball of flickering sacred pale flames from the depths of the void. It was a scepter, a 2-meter-long scepter. This scepter was as thick as an ordinary person's arm, and its entire body seemed to be made of white divine gold. It was engraved with countless divine runes, crisscrossing and containing endless mysteries. Every strand of divine rune seemed to explain this side of the void. The mysteries of heaven and earth. At the top of the scepter was a pale white ball the size of 2 fists inlaid. Light and shadow seemed to flow incessantly within it, like rising clouds, thunder, and lightning flashing. It was like a boundless world, a heavenly divine artifact. It was also at the level of a quasi-divine artifact. It was even more powerful than ordinary quasi-divine artifacts. The moment that scepter appeared, Chen Zong's eyes focused, and a sense of palpitations involuntarily welled up in his heart. It seemed that the power contained within the scepter was already threatening him. Involuntarily, Chen Zong thought of the great dark sky empire, and the huge pitch-black mountain that the phantom of the demon emperor Xinggu had controlled when he appeared. The eternal demon mountain. That was the demon divine artifact controlled by the demon emperor Xinggu, and its power was also very astonishing. However, it still felt a little inferior to the scepter in the hands of the divine brilliance great emperor in front of him. Whether it was inferior or not, Chen Zong actually didn't dare to be sure. It was just his first impression, but in any case, this scepter was at the level of a quasi-divine artifact. Its power was astonishing, and it would definitely pose a strong threat to him. With the divine scepter in hand, the aura of the divine brilliance great emperor merged with it, and his strength soared to the extreme. The void in all directions was suppressed, and the oppressive aura also spread out. Immediately, the divine brilliance great emperor waved the divine scepter in his hand, and a layer of light suddenly spread out from it, instantly enveloping all directions and covering a radius of 10,000 meters. When Chen Zong was swept past, he only felt his body sink slightly, and there was a trace of stagnation in the operation of his power. The power of the divine scepter covered a radius of 10,000 meters. The scepter left the hands of the divine brilliance great emperor and fell into the void, as if suppressing everything. Domain. The divine scepter released amazing power, forming a domain that suppressed and imprisoned the void within a radius of 10,000 meters. Waves of terrible power came from all directions, constantly squeezing Chen Zong, putting Chen Zong under great pressure. The waves of power were like turbulent waves, disturbing the operation of the mixed yuan heart force in Chen Zong's body, and it felt a little sluggish. Once the operation of the power of cultivation was not so smooth, it would affect the performance of one's strength to a certain extent, causing one's strength to be weakened. Chen Zong's heart trembled. The power of this divine artifact was indeed amazing. It could directly cause such an effect. The divine brilliance great emperor also made his move in an instant. He took a step forward and punched out. With a boom, a terrible pale fist print broke through the air, and with a terrible power that could purify and destroy everything, it blasted mercilessly toward Chen Zong, trying to kill Chen Zong directly here. When he took out the divine artifact, the divine brilliance great emperor, it meant that he would no longer have the slightest mercy. No matter whether you came from the divine ruins or where you came from, you must die. The dignity of the great emperor could not be violated, and the safety of the dynasty could not be disturbed. This punch, coupled with the domain of the divine scepter, immediately brought a strong threat to Chen Zong, causing Chen Zong to feel a sense of fear and trepidation for no reason. Full strength. Since entering the divine brilliance dynasty, Chen Zong had first killed Heavenly Lord Long River, then killed Heavenly Lord Xinguang, and then killed Heavenly Lord Xingyan and his phoenix beast, the Heavenly Fire Sacred Phoenix. But no matter in which battle, Chen Zong had not really burst out with his full strength. The most power he had used was in the battle with Heavenly Lord Xinguang, where he had only activated one void aperture point. But now, when Chen Zong's full strength was unleashed, streaks of darkness suddenly appeared behind him. The darkness was about the size of a bowl. It was as big as a small black hole vortex that kept spinning. 1 streak, 2 streaks, 3 streaks, a total of 7 black hole vortexes appeared behind Chen Zong. As they spun, they emitted traces of extremely powerful and pure aura fluctuations. They resonated with the powerful mixed yuan heart force in Chen Zong's indestructible body of the universe. They were of the same origin. The 7 void aperture points formed a ring that appeared behind Chen Zong and spun slowly. Originally, when Chen Zong entered the Divine Brilliance dynasty, he had only opened 6 void aperture points. But when the ancient divine sword armor was upgraded from the general level to the king level, it also further refined Chen Zong's indestructible body of the universe. Its strength had more than doubled. This way, Chen Zong could bear the burden of opening more void aperture points. As a result, Chernzong had opened the seventh void aperture point and filled it with mixed yuan heart force. It was equivalent to having 7 times the power of his cultivation. Such an extremely powerful power could be said to be vast. It was enough to support the king-level ancient divine sword armor's high-intensity consumption. After all, it would recover as it was consumed. With Chernzong's mixed yuan heart force's super-fast recovery speed, the power in the 7 void aperture points would not be depleted in a short period of time. It was more than enough to support a high-intensity battle for an hour. If he did not use high-intensity outbursts, it would not be impossible for him to hold on for a few hours. Chernzong did not intend to hold on for a few hours. He wanted to end the battle as soon as possible. Explode. The mixed yuan heart force exploded 5 times. A sword slashed across the sky, stealing all the light in the world. Darkness suddenly descended. Only a sword light pierced through the sky. It was extremely bright and dazzling. The array that sealed Chernzong was destroyed in an instant. The 4 ordinary heavenly venerables' expressions changed drastically, and they immediately retreated. It was difficult for them to intervene in such a battle. They could only watch from the sidelines to prevent Chernzong from escaping. A sword slashed across the sky and instantly split the overbearing fist print. It then slashed toward the Divine Brilliance Great Emperor. The Divine Brilliance Great Emperor's expression changed unconsciously. Under the suppression of the heavenly deity Scepter's domain, he could still explode with such power. This person's strength had definitely reached the top level among the ultimate heavenly venerables. He was not inferior to the Divine Brilliance Great Emperor at all. No, he was even somewhat superior to the Divine Brilliance Great Emperor. If he did not have the heavenly deity scepter, the Divine Brilliance Great Emperor would not be a match for him. The premise was that the other party did not have a heavenly divine artifact. As this thought flashed through his mind, the Divine Brilliance Great Emperor dodged the Divine Brilliance Great Emperor's sword and slammed his palm across the sky. It was as if an ancient divine mountain was rampaging, wanting to smash everything in front of it. The Divine Brilliance Great Emperor had mastered many secret combat techniques, and was proficient in all kinds of them. His strength was truly terrifying. His mixed element heart force exploded tenfold. With 7 void aperture acupoints as a supplement, coupled with the astonishing recovery speed of his mixed element heart force, Chernzong did not have to use any explosive power to explode with an extremely powerful strength. The Eternal Star. The shadow of an ancient star suddenly appeared, as if it had been dragged out from the ancient time and space. As soon as it appeared, it exuded an extremely heavy pressure. That pressure was ancient and boundless, and as it descended, the void seemed to be fluctuating. If it had not been for the suppression of the domain of the heavenly deity scepter, the void would not have been able to withstand the descent of the eternal star and would have collapsed directly. The Divine Brilliance Great Emperor's expression changed drastically again. The power of this attack was so terrifying that it made him feel a sense of horror from the bottom of his heart. The palm print, which was like an ancient divine mountain, instantly came into contact with the shadow of the ancient star. There was a slight pause, and there was an earth-shattering explosion of momentum. Terrifying ripples crazily rushed out from the point of collision, as if to completely shatter the void. Chapter 33:22. Rumble. There were no clouds in the sky for thousands of miles. There was only a huge illusory star across the sky, smashing everything like a falling meteor. A huge palm print with pale white flames spread across the sky like a divine mountain, as if to shatter the 9 heavens. When the star collided with the palm print, it paused, frantically bursting out layers of terrifying ripples that raged in all directions. In the next moment, cracks appeared on the palm print. It could not withstand the terrifying power of the eternal stars and collapsed directly. Impact, crushing. The eternal stars instantly bombarded the divine brilliance great emperor. The terrifying power and boundless pressure instantly suffocated him. In the face of this ancient and tyrannical shadow of the stars, the divine brilliance great emperor found himself unable to move. Even more so, from the bottom of his heart, he felt that he could not resist and would be crushed. Unprecedented. Chernzong's strength was not inferior to the divine brilliance great emperor in the first place, and might even surpass him by a little. Not to mention the tenfold explosion of the mixed yuan heart force, that kind of power directly increased the power of the eternal stars to the extreme. If it were not for the suppression of the domain of the sky deity scepter, the divine brilliance great emperor would not have been able to withstand the eternal stars. Even now, he felt suffocated. Without hesitation, the divine brilliance great emperor grabbed the void with his right hand, and the sky deity's scepter suddenly flew into his hand. It stabbed forward like a long spear, directly piercing the illusory star. This stab erupted with the tyrannical power of the sky deity's scepter, and the power of a heavenly divine artifact was fully displayed. The illusory star paused slightly and began to crack under the tyrannical power of the sky deity's scepter. After all, a heavenly divine artifact had unpredictable power, and there was an essential difference between it and a top chaotic divine artifact. Even a quasi-divine artifact could not be compared to it. The tenfold mixed yuan heart force erupted again, and a sword of Taihao rose into the sky, burning incessantly. The power of the Taihao true fire was boundless, as if it could burn the sky. Under the explosion of the tenfold mixed yuan heart force, Chernzong repeatedly displayed secret swords. Blood azura. Under the sword, a blood-colored phantom emerged, and everything around suddenly froze, as if it was a domain. Although it was not as powerful as the sky deity scepter, it also offset the influence of the sky deity scepter's domain to a certain extent. Secret swords were displayed one by one. With the sword, a dark light suddenly appeared, and wisps of it diffused from the depths of the void, condensing, exuding a terrifying aura, and then attacked everything between heaven and earth. The divine brilliance great emperor kept waving the divine deity's scepter in his hand, relying on the tyrannical power of the divine deity's scepter to resist Chernzong's attacks, but his expression was extremely solemn and even more horrified. How could this person's strength be so terrifying? His explosive power was astonishing. Every sword strike was a serious threat to him. If it wasn't for the divine scepter in his hand, he would have been unable to withstand it. How powerful of the divine brilliance! Of the divine brilliance of the brilliance of the sky. It was unimaginable. The divine brilliance great emperor became even more fearful. It should be known that using the divine scepter was not so easy. It would increase the consumption of one's own strength. Once his strength was exhausted, he would no longer be able to activate the power of the divine scepter, and the consequences would be dire. Chernzong only felt incomparably carefree. The feeling of not having to restrain his power, of being able to erupt and attack to his heart's content, was really wonderful. It was so wonderful that it was difficult to describe it clearly with words. Unrestrained, wantonly, to his heart's content. Dripping, dripping, dripping. As Chernzong continued to unleash his attacks, he gained a deeper understanding of the one-mind swordsmanship. He also gained a deeper understanding of the secret swordsmanship. Sure enough, this kind of high-intensity, all-out battle was also an excellent way to improve one's own strength. The mixed yuan heart force in the void aperture was constantly being consumed and restored, but in the end it was a high-intensity eruption. The speed of recovery could not keep up with the speed of consumption. The four ordinary heavenly venerables in the distance were already stunned. Since when had the divine brilliance great emperor been suppressed, and when he was holding the sky deity's scepter? It was unimaginable. No one in the divine brilliance dynasty would believe it, but the truth was right in front of them. The strength of this heavenly venerable, who called himself Sword Master Tianguang, was really too terrifying. The divine brilliance great emperor's expression was solemn. He fully activated the power of the sky deity scepter, and all his power poured into the scepter without reservation. The sky deity scepter suddenly trembled, and immediately, a light shadow rose from it and manifested, turning into a human figure that stood in the sky. Endless brilliance constantly emanated from that human figure. It was as astonishing as a high and mighty god. Chen Zong's expression became more and more solemn. This godlike phantom actually made him feel a terrible threat. Fleeting beauty. Without hesitation, Chen Zong attacked with another secret sword. A bit of sword light pierced through the air and fell directly on the godlike phantom. At first, it was weak and seemed to have no power, but then, like a seed, it crazily devoured the power of the phantom. The phantom reacted in time and immediately stirred up all its power to destroy the power that invaded its body. Kill. As the shadow of the deity waved his hand, beams of divine light surged and bombarded Chen Zong. The power of each beam of divine light was actually at the level of the full-strength attack of the divine brilliance great emperor. What was even more frightening was that the divine light seemed to be endless. Beam after beam, the attack was continuous, and the attack became faster and faster. In the end, there seemed to be more than a dozen beams of divine light, or even dozens of beams of divine light, all bombarding Chen Zong. Ancient star. The ancient phantom of the stars suddenly appeared and descended in an instant, bombarding the beams of divine light. At the same time, it also resisted the beams of divine light. The power of this secret sword was tyrannical and boundless. At the same time, it also had a certain degree of defensive ability. However, under the bombardment of the divine light, the ancient star was still unable to resist and was defeated. Chen Zong seized the fleeting opportunity to dodge and attacked the phantom with fleeting beauty again. Although fleeting beauty could not be used fully, it could still wear down some of the phantom's power. Chen Zong did not believe that the phantom's power was limitless. Extreme. Chen Zong was completely desperate, displaying his strength to the extreme. Cracks continuously appeared in the void, and then it collapsed inch by inch as if it was caving in. It was extremely terrifying. The divine brilliance great emperor's expression was extremely ugly. Even the full power of the divine deity's scepter could not do anything to his opponent. He could feel that the power contained in the divine deity's scepter was constantly weakening and could not hold on for much longer. Once the power of the divine deity's scepter was exhausted, and his own power was almost exhausted, if his opponent still had strength left, then the consequence would be to be killed. Thinking of this, the divine brilliance great emperor immediately pointed his finger at the divine deity's scepter. The phantom of the god trembled and then erupted with all its power, turning into a huge beam of divine light that was several times more powerful than any previous beam of divine light. It blasted directly at Chen Zong, shattering everything. After launching this attack, the divine brilliance great emperor immediately grabbed the divine deity's scepter, erupted with his remaining power, and flew directly to the warship. The 4 ordinary celestial masters also received the news and immediately retreated, flying into the warship. Under the bombardment of the huge divine light, Chen Zong could not resist and was directly knocked back thousands of meters away. If it were not for the tyrannical defensive power of the ancient god's sword armor, he would not have been able to resist at all. Even so, Chen Zong felt that the indestructible body of the universe was shattered in an instant and had to consume a lot of mixed element heart force to recover. In the distance, the warship was launched and directly shuttled away at an astonishing speed, heading into the distance. They had escaped. The divine brilliance great emperor had escaped with 4 ordinary celestial masters. Chen Zong was slightly startled, but he had no intention of chasing after him. This was because his mixed yuan heart force was about to be used up. The mixed yuan heart force in the 7 void aperture acupoints had been used up, and only 30% of the mixed yuan heart force in his body remained. With only 30% of the mixed element heart force, it would not be able to support the ancient god sword armor for a long time. The consequence of chasing after them was that not only would he not be able to kill the divine brilliance great emperor, but he might even be killed instead. There were still 4 ordinary celestial masters who had not consumed much of their power. Go! Chen Zong immediately erupted with extreme speed, fleeing in different directions of the warship. Then, he put away the ancient god sword armor, and his mixed element heart force began to rapidly recover. This battle is too satisfying, Chen Zong could not help but secretly say, his face still a little excited. Satisfying. Satisfying. Incisively and vividly. It was just too exhausting. The power of his own cultivation plus the power of the 7 void acupoints was 8 times the power of his cultivation, which was almost depleted. It was simply astonishing. Taking into account the recovery speed of the mixed element heart force, it was equivalent to directly consuming 9 times the power of his cultivation. Even so, he still could not defeat the divine brilliance great emperor, which was enough to prove the strength of the divine brilliance great emperor. Taking a step back, if he had not obtained the secret of the void energy concealment, he would not have been a match for the divine brilliance great emperor at all. At the same time, Chen Zong was reminiscing about the battle just now. That feeling of not caring about his own energy consumption and attacking without restraint was truly wonderful. Through it, Chen Zong was able to peek into even more profound mysteries of swordsmanship, which allowed him to further strengthen his swordsmanship. The power of his secret swords also increased slightly, allowing him to reach a higher level of comprehension. The mixed element heart force continued to recover and finally recovered to 100%, but it was still not enough. There were still 7 void acupoints that were empty and needed to continue to recover. Chen Zong stimulated the first void acupoint and slowly infused the mixed element heart force into it, recovering as he did so. This way, there would not be any dangerous situations that were difficult to deal with due to the injection of power too quickly. Finally, Chen Zong filled all 7 void acupoints with the mixed element heart force, and his cultivation was completely restored to its peak. It's time to leave, Chen Zong said to himself. Although he had defeated the divine brilliance great emperor and forced him to flee, Chen Zong did not feel complacent, nor did he intend to stay any longer. There was always a sense of unease, as if something terrible would happen if he continued to stay, and it would be very disadvantageous to him or even threaten his life. Just like the ancient Illumination God dynasty had set up 3 strongholds in the Black Sky Empire, the Heaven Heart dynasty had also set up several secret and remote strongholds in the Divine Brilliance dynasty. Chen Zong arrived at one of the strongholds. After confirming that no one was chasing after him, he immediately stimulated the power of the Light Spirit Essence and used it to bring him away from the Divine Brilliance dynasty and back to the Heaven Heart dynasty. Chapter 33-23. Inside a large array in the Heaven Heart dynasty, the space was suddenly torn apart by a white thread. A 3-meter-tall crack appeared and a figure stepped out of it. Immediately, an extremely powerful intent descended and locked onto Chen Zong as if it wanted to see through him. After a while, after confirming that there was nothing unusual, Chen Zong stepped out of the large array. Heaven Heart Dynasty. After leaving the Divine Radiance Dynasty and returning to the Heaven Heart Dynasty, Chen Zong was still reminiscing about his experience in the Divine Radiance Dynasty. When he first entered the Dark Sky Empire in the Demonic Universe Epic Fragment, he was not strong enough. Thus, he had to take every step carefully and slowly integrate into the demonic tribe. Then, he had to wait for an opportunity to act. He had spent many years. If Demon Emperor Xing Gu's mausoleum had not appeared in the world during the cold disaster, He would probably have to spend even more time slowly planning. It could have taken 10 years or even decade. When he came to the Heaven Heart dynasty, a considerable number of the prodigies who had entered the Dark Sky Empire with him had not returned to the Divine Radiance dynasty. They had remained in the Dark Sky Empire to plan. He had been very lucky to be able to obtain the demonic soul and so on in a few years. However, the Divine Radiance dynasty was different. He did not need to take every step carefully. With one sword, he had killed 3 heavenly venerables at an extremely fast speed. In addition to the time spent searching for traces of heavenly venerables, it had only taken him a few months. In the end, it was still a matter of strength. When he entered the Dark Sky Empire, he could only keep a low profile, hide, and take every step carefully and wait for an opportunity to act. However, in the Divine Radiance dynasty, he was strong enough. When he unleashed his full power, he would be at the level of an ultimate heavenly venerable. Naturally, he did not need to keep a low profile and be so cautious. If he had not been worried about unpredictable risks, Chernzong's actions would have been even more high-profile. Carefree. Compared to the step-by-step actions in the Dark Sky Empire, Chernzong preferred the kind of actions in the Divine Radiance dynasty. Powerful strength was the capital to move freely. It was very carefree and satisfying. At the end of the day, it all comes down to strength. As long as I'm strong enough, nothing will be a threat to me. Naturally, I won't have to worry so much, Chernzong thought to himself, his eyes shining brightly. If he had the strength of a demigod, he wouldn't have to worry about anything. Even if a heavenly god appeared, he wouldn't have to be afraid. However, although his current strength was not weak, he still could not be compared to a demigod. Back then, Chernzong had thought that the top few on the Chaos Real leaderboard were close to the strength of a demigod and even had a chance of escaping from a demigod. Now, it seemed that he had been naive. The power of a demigod was immeasurable. Even though he was far more powerful than Martial Godlord, who was ranked first on the Chaotic Real ranking board, he had no confidence in fighting against a demigod. There was no way he could contend against one. The gap between them was like the gap between heaven and earth. The more powerful he was, the closer he was to becoming a demigod. Chernzong could feel how powerful and terrifying a demigod was. It was as deep and boundless as an abyss, and he yearned for it more and more. After stepping out of the formation and verifying it, Chernzong took out an elite heavenly man bloodline and handed it over. He was compensated with 20 divine points. In addition, Chernzong also had a top-notch heavenly fire sacred phoenix bloodline. It was extraordinary and was worth at least 100 divine points. If it was auctioned, it could be auctioned for more than 100 divine points. However, Chernzong did not intend to sell it. He planned to keep it and hand it over to Yunyenshin to see if he could refine it and use it to replace the star-burning True Phoenix bloodline. He did not need to integrate these bloodlines to continue to grow. Yunyenshin had a strong bloodline, but it was difficult to improve it. After finding Xiucheng and bidding farewell to him, Chernzong left the Sky Heart Holy Court and returned to the Ancient Light Holy Court. It's time to hand over the heavenly soul and demonic soul to Lord Dijio. Chernzong thought to himself. The deal had not been completed, and it had been lingering in his heart. Only when it was completed could he relax. Chernzong did not return to the Ancient Light Holy Court first. Instead, he went to the main building of the Divine Mystery Tower. The main building of the Divine Mystery Tower was located in the Ancient Light Holy Court. When he arrived at the main building of the Divine Mystery Tower, Chernzong was immediately warmly received by the Elder of the Divine Mystery Tower. Transcendent Saint Realm. Chernzong was a Transcendent Saint Realm expert. A Transcendent Saint Realm expert who had once defeated Mu Qingyang. He was powerful. A strong person was a strong person. No matter where he was, he would be respected. I want to see Lord Dijio to complete the deal from back then. Chen Zong directly stated his purpose of visit. Elder, you can report it. This elder obviously did not know about the deal between Dijiu and Chen Zong. Hence, he was a little surprised. One should know that Lord Dijiu was a demigod realm expert. It was not easy to see him, and he could not be disturbed. However, since the other party said that he was a transcendent saint realm expert, perhaps he could give it a try. He did not have to wait for too long before he received a reply. Descend. Dijiu immediately created a clone and descended upon the main building of the Divine Mystery Tower. He turned his gaze and stared at Chen Zong. For no reason, Chen Zong felt an indescribable pressure descend upon him. It landed on his body, and seemed to have become heavier out of nowhere. Chen Zong's expression did not change, but his heart was filled with awe. A demigod realm expert was indeed extremely terrifying. The more he came into contact with them, the more he felt and the more he knew how powerful they were. It was merely the concentration of the consciousness of a clone, but it made him feel a lot of pressure. Of course, if he were to fight, Chen Zong was confident that he could resist this demigod clone and even defeat it. However, the strength of the clone was very different from the strength of the original body. There was nothing to be happy about resisting a demigod clone. Moreover, there were different types of demigod clones. Some clones were formed for convenience and did not carry much power. Naturally, their strength was not strong. However, some clones were formed for battle. Naturally, the power they carried was stronger. The clone of Dijiu before him did not carry much power. When he saw Chen Zong and stared at him, a bright light flashed in the eyes of Dijiu's clone. He was faintly surprised. With his cultivation level, he could naturally see that Chen Zong's current state was far better than when he had entered the Zhaogu God dynasty. His strength was like heaven and earth. To think that his improvement would be so great and so fast. It had truly exceeded his expectations. It seemed that the deal that he had made in the spur of the moment had yielded good result. That's right. To a demigod, they could give opportunities to whoever they wanted. Everything depended on their mood and interest. My lord, Chen Zong bowed with his sword and took out the heavenly soul and demonic soul and handed them to Dijiu. Very good. Dijiu's clone took the heavenly soul and demonic soul and nodded. You are very good. I hope that one day you can be on par with me. What he meant was that he hoped that one day Chen Zong could become a demigod and be on par with them. After speaking, Dijiu's clone did not continue to stay there. Instead, he took the heavenly soul and demonic soul and left. The heavenly soul and demonic soul were the condensation of the essence of a heavenly lord heavenly human and a demon emperor demon. They were indeed extraordinary and extremely valuable. If the news spread, it would lead to countless disputes and even a bloody storm. However, to a demigod, it was nothing. The reason why Dijiu wanted the heavenly soul and demonic soul was to study them. He wanted to study the characteristics of the heavenly human tribe and the demon tribe. What Dijiu loved the most was to study everything about the ancient universe era. Of course, he would not let go of the characteristics of the heavenly human tribe and the demon tribe. After the deal was completed, Chen Zong heaved a sigh of relief. He left the Tianji Tower and returned to the Zhaogu Palace. Now, my cultivation has reached the limit. It is almost impossible for me to improve further. Chen Zong could not help but think to himself. The highest level of the ancient divine sword armor was the king level. Now that he had improved to the king level, he was not sure if there were any higher levels. After all, he had inherited the soldier level, general level, and king level. Now that the ancient divine sword armor had been improved to its peak, it could not be improved any further. This meant that Chen Zong's fighting strength could not be improved any further. It was also difficult for the immortal universe body to be improved. As a result, the immortal universe body could not open the 8th and 9th apertures. Otherwise, the consequences of opening them by force would be that the immortal universe body could not withstand it and would collapse. If Chen Zong cultivated the void origin concealment art to perfection and opened up 9 void acupoints, the 9 acupoints would be able to combine and form a cycle. Although it might not be able to reach the stage of endless growth, it would be able to recover faster, allowing Chen Zong to have a longer battle prowess. It was a pity that opening the void apertures required a strong enough body to withstand the burden. Whether it was the strengthening of the immortal universe body or the tempering of the mixed Yuan heart force, they had reached a bottleneck. It was difficult to continue. Only the divine decree could continue tempering, but the tempering effect was getting weaker and weaker. It could be said that in the following period of time, for quite a long period of time, his strength would fall into a bottleneck period. It was a pity that Chen Zong did not know how to become a demigod. He did not have any clue. In that case, he had to continue comprehending his swordsmanship and improve his swordsmanship as much as possible. Even though his swordsmanship had reached such a level and it was extremely difficult to improve further, as long as he worked hard, he would be able to improve more or less. He could even travel around the chaotic universe to broaden his horizons and strengthen his foundation. Once he had accumulated enough foundation, he might be able to make further progress and strengthen himself further. Then, he would leave the ancient divine dynasty for now and return to Taihao Mountain. However, before he returned, he had to exchange for some resources. Chen Zong immediately sold the many spoils of war he had obtained from the Divine Radiance dynasty and exchanged them for Divine Origin. In the end, he managed to sell them for a high price of 50 Divine Origin. In total, he had 70 Divine Origin. Exchange. Chen Zong began to exchange for all kinds of useful resources. There were things for Yunyanxin, for Chenan, and for Taihao Mountain. 70 Divine Origin did not sound like much, but it was not little at all. That was a fortune of 700 to 800 million chaotic divine gems. How shocking was that? After doing all this, Chen Zong immediately reported to the Holy Gate. The Holy Gate quickly approved Chen Zong's departure. Chen Zong could even come back after leaving. With Chen Zong's current status, he could even be recommended. Chapter 33-24. In the boundless void, in the vast universe, a huge circular platform stood there, motionless. It was as if the vicissitudes of the world could not affect it at all, and the passage of time could not erode it. A crack suddenly appeared and slowly opened up. It was as if a pair of invisible but powerful hands were pulling it to the left and right. It turned into a door to the sky. It was ancient and deep, as if it contained endless mysteries. A figure seemed to slowly emerge from the bottom of the water. It became clearer and clearer on the surface of the water. Then it stepped out. That figure seemed to have crossed through 2 different dimensions. He stepped out of the mysterious door and stood on the platform. Chen Zong could not help but sigh. Back then, he had followed Elder Lei, Zhongli Yu, and Fei Jun of the Heaven's Secret Sect from the ancient Mirror Primal Chaos City to this place. They had used this platform to open the door and entered the ancient Mirror God dynasty. Between the 3 divine dynasties, there were teleportation portals that allowed them to teleport each other. After so many years, he had temporarily left the ancient Zhao God dynasty and returned to the chaotic universe. Although the 3 dynasties were also in the chaotic universe, they were small worlds created by demigod experts with great power and amazing means. To some extent, they were still different from the chaotic universe. Chen Zong put away his emotions and took a step forward. It was as if the end of the world had become a foot in front of him. He instantly swept across the sky. 1 step was 1,000 miles. Now, Chen Zong's strength had reached a shocking level. It was terrifying. It could be said that he was the strongest below demigod level. The martial god lord, who was ranked first on the chaotic real ranking, was nothing to Chunzong. Even if Chunzong did not use his full strength and did not use the ancient god sword armor, he could easily suppress the martial god lord with his normal strength. No matter how strong the martial god lord was, he was only at the top demon king level. He had not reached the demon emperor level. However, after all these years, it was undeniable that the martial god lord's strength had improved. He might have broken through the shackles and reached the demon emperor level. Of course, the possibility was not high. In fact, it had nothing to do with Chunzong. He burst forth with astonishing speed, taking one step after another. Each step covered a distance of 1,000 miles as he flew towards ancient Primal Chaos City. After arriving at the ancient Primal Chaos City, Chunzong used the Spacetime Temple's teleportation array and flew towards Yuanzhan Universe City. Taihao Mountain was located within Primordial Executioner Universe City. However, this time, Chunzong had returned with a purpose, which was to relocate Taihao Mountain to a better place that would be more conducive for cultivation. As for where exactly that place would be, it would take some time to find it. There was no need to be too anxious about this. It didn't take long for Chunzong to arrive at Yuanzhan Universe City and enter Taihao Mountain. Chunzong did not inform anyone of his return to Taihao Mountain, so only his incarnation knew. With Chunzong's strength and methods, no one would be able to discover his arrival as long as he did not want to be discovered. Over the years, the Taihao Mountain's development had been relatively stable. With the 100 Swords God and the 5 Ultimate Swords God in charge, their top combat strength was astonishing, enough to deter many small fries. If not for the fact that they did not have a demigod backing them up, the Taihao Mountain would have been the most tyrannical force in the original human territory. In addition to the 100 Swords God Lord and the 5 Ultimate Sword God, Chunzong's incarnation was also extremely powerful. It was even stronger than the 100 Swords God Lord and the 5 Ultimate Sword God. In addition, Yunyenshin's strength was also extraordinary. Among the ranks of the Primal Chaos list, there was Sword Saint Wu Sha, who was also a true saint expert. In addition, there was Wang Yi, who was also an expert on the Primal Chaos list. Even if the Martial God Lord personally attacked Taihao Mountain, he would not be able to achieve anything. It was impregnable. In this way, Taihao Mountain was, of course, safe. There was a place on Taihao Mountain where disciples were not allowed to go. There were mountains and rivers, lush vegetation, and pavilions. The scenery was unique, and there was a graceful figure dancing with a sword. Sword light crisscrossed, and it had a grand and majestic appearance, yet it also contained delicacy. It was like a phoenix spreading its wings and sweeping through the sky. The person who was practicing the sword was Yunyenshin. After many years, Yunyenshin's cultivation did not improve much, but his swordsmanship had become more refined. In an instant, a sudden change occurred. A ray of sword light seemed to break through the air from the void and flew directly toward Yunyenshin. Yunyenshin's expression changed unconsciously, and he immediately swung his sword to meet the attack. The ray of sword light was extremely mysterious. When it was used, it displayed extremely high attainments in swordsmanship. It was as if a peerless swordsman was waving it, repeatedly attacking Yunyenshin. It caught him off guard and forced Yunyenshin to display his swordsmanship to the extreme. Even some things that he did not understand in the past were stimulated under the pressure of this ray of sword light. He comprehended them one by one, making his swordsmanship even more refined. Yunyenshin smiled. He originally thought that someone could sneak into Taihao Mountain to assassinate him, but after a few exchanges, Yunyenshin knew who it was. An hour later, the ray of sword light shattered and disappeared. A figure also stepped out of the void. He opened his arms and walked toward Yunyenshin with a smile. "You're back." Yunyenshin's face was filled with joy. He immediately threw himself into his arms and hugged him quietly, enjoying the moment of tranquility. All these years, Yunyenshin had been staying in Taihao Mountain. As for his son, Chunen, he had gone out to explore. He had the strength of a true saint and was able to protect himself in most situations in the chaotic multiverse. A baby eagle would eventually grow up after spreading its wings. After hugging each other for a while, the two of them sat down. Chunzong also told Yunyenshin about his experiences over the years. Yunyenshin's beautiful eyes shone brightly. Finally, Chunzong took out the bloodline of the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix and let Yunyenshin try to see if he could refine it or use it to replace the power of the Star-Scorching True Phoenix bloodline. After all, the power of the Star-Scorching True Phoenix bloodline was still weaker than the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix bloodline. It was a top-notch Deva bloodline. Once it was refined, one's potential would be greatly increased and one's strength would increase significantly. Yunyenshin solemnly took the bloodline and carefully sensed it. He immediately felt a boundless power from it. It was a power that his star-scorching true phoenix bloodline could not compare to. "Let me try," Yunyenshin said and immediately tried. After several tries, he revealed a look of joy. "I seem to be able to refine this bloodline and merge it with the star-scorching true phoenix bloodline, increasing its level." Chunzong was secretly surprised, but he also revealed a smile. This was a good thing. After all, the star-scorching true phoenix bloodline belonged to Yunyenshin. He had already mastered it to the extreme. If it was replaced by the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix bloodline, then Yunyenshin would need to adapt to the new bloodline and slowly adjust to it and master it. If the star-scorching true phoenix bloodline could be improved, it would also increase Yunyenshin's strength and potential. As for how much of an increase it would be, that was unknown. After the two of them spent some time together, Yunyenshin entered seclusion. While he was in seclusion, Chunzong's strength had reached an extremely astonishing level. The gap between them had been further widened and he needed to catch up. Refining the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix bloodline and using it as nutrients to improve his star-scorching true phoenix bloodline would increase his strength and potential. This was a very good way to close the gap between him and Chunzong. It was not that Yunyen had any intention of dissatisfaction or competition in his heart, but he understood that he could not be a burden. In case of any crisis, he would become a burden because of his lack of strength. That was absolutely not allowed. Yunyenshin entered seclusion to refine the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix bloodline. Chunzong naturally had nothing to do. However, even if he had nothing to do, Chunzong still focused on comprehending swordsmanship in the chaotic prime realm and deducing the next step of his cultivation. They did not interfere with each other and did not affect his usual actions. Following that, Chunzong began to summon the people of Taihao Mountain. An avatar was an avatar after all, but the actual body was different. The cultivation of the Sword's Divine Lord and the 5 Ultimate Sword Divine Lord did not change, but their swordsmanship had improved due to their frequent exchanges. At their level, it would be very difficult for them to improve further if they did not encounter a greater opportunity. It was a pity that when he was in the Divine Radiance Empire, he had originally planned to refine more bloodlines, but he had been found by the Divine Radiance Great Emperor. After that battle, he had not dared to stay any longer and had left as quickly as possible. Otherwise, he could have taken out some bloodlines and given them to the people of Taihao Mountain to increase their strength and potential. Well, it could only mean that he had not been so thoughtful back then. Since it was all in the past, there was no point in dwelling on it. However, it wasn't as if he couldn't increase the strength of Taihao Mountain in other ways. One must know that he had spent a few dozen divine origin points to purchase many resources. Those were all precious treasures that were difficult to obtain in the current void of the universe. If he used them properly, the overall strength of Taihao Mountain would definitely increase by 1 or 2 levels. There was even a chance for it to increase by 2 or 3 levels. After summoning the elders and disciples of Taihao Mountain, Chunzong began to refine the avatar again. Although the Avatar's strength was not weak and was comparable to that of martial Godlord, who was ranked first on the real chaotic roll, it was still too weak for Chen Zong's original body. He needed to refine it again. This was one of the reasons why Chen Zong had returned. For the refinement this time, Chen Zong had used many higher-grade treasures to make the incarnation even stronger. In the end, the Avatar was refined. Its aura was so strong that it was simply shocking. "Thank you, original body." The Avatar bowed with a sword and then laughed. Although the Avatar could not be compared to the original body, it had reached the level of the transcendent Saint Realm and had the normal combat strength of the original body. The normal combat strength of Chen Zong's original body was stronger than that of an ordinary Transcendent Saint Realm expert, but weaker than that of a top Transcendent Saint Realm expert. Only after equipping the ancient divine sword armor could his strength reach the level of a Transcendent Saint Realm expert. However, the strength of a top Transcendent Saint Realm expert was actually enough in the void of the universe. Even if Chen Zong's original body left Taihao Mountain, he would be safe with the Avatar guarding. When Yanxin comes out of seclusion, I'll take her out with me and find a suitable place for Taihao Mountain, Chen Zong thought to himself. The current Yuanzhan Cosmic City had actually delayed the development of Taihao Mountain. He had to find a more suitable place for Taihao Mountain. Otherwise, it would be detrimental to the future development and inheritance of Taihao Mountain. In addition, after settling everything in Taihao Mountain, Chen Zong planned to leave and travel the chaotic universe. Chapter 33-25. Outside Taihao Mountain, a beam of sword light shot over. After entering Universe City, it went straight to Taihao Mountain. After confirming its identity, it officially stepped into Taihao Mountain. Father. This person was Chen An, who had returned from training outside. The moment he saw Chen Zong, Chen An's face immediately lit up. He was very excited. After not seeing him for so many years, he missed him very much. Seeing that Chen An had returned safely, Chen Zong also showed a hint of joy. Then, it was time to test Chen An's swordsmanship. He wanted to see how much Chen An's swordsmanship had improved over the years. As a swordsman, it was necessary to have superb swordsmanship. Chen An attacked with all his might, unleashing his swordsmanship to the extreme. Chen Zong did not move from his spot and used his fingers as a sword to casually point at Chen An. Every finger and every sword was extremely mysterious. They directly attacked the weak points of Chen An's swordsmanship, forcing Chen An to change his moves to deal with Chen Zong's sword fingers. As he changed his moves, Chen An's potential was also excavated bit by bit. His swordsmanship also became more perfect and refined. 4 hours later, Chen Zong stopped and stopped. However, Chen An did not stop. He was still waving his sword and practicing his swordsmanship. This swordsmanship was the culmination of his years of practice. In the end, it was a superb swordsmanship that he had created based on his own characteristics and so on. However, there was still room for improvement. Now, under Chen Zong's guidance and name of sparring, Chen An fell into an epiphany. This sudden comprehension lasted for 3 days. Chen An practiced the sword for an entire 3 days before he stopped. His sword technique had already advanced to an even higher level since a long time ago, and there was a unique aura when he attacked. The sword light that seemed to be gentle seemed like flowing water that flowed without end, yet the sword force contained within it was extremely blazing and violent to the extreme. However, all of this was restrained, and it was utterly impossible to notice if one's perception wasn't sharp enough. However, as long as one was hit, the terrifying sword force would explode and destroy everything in its path. In Chen Zong's opinion, although this swordsmanship was far from being comparable to divine sword technique, it was already very good. It was enough to show that Chen An had put in a lot of effort and talent in swordsmanship at the true saint stage. Chernzong then took out a sharp sword and a set of armor and handed them to Chernin. The sword was a top-tier Chaos Saint artifact. It was several times stronger than the ordinary Chaos Saint artifacts Chen An currently wielded. It was enough to double Chen An's strength. The armor was a top-tier Chaos Saint artifact as well. It possessed powerful defensive capabilities. It could also enhance Chen An's defensive capabilities and increase his survivability. One attack and one defense directly increased Chen An's strength in all aspects. It was enough to surpass most top-tier True Saints and was close to the peak True Saint realm. After that, Chernzong took out a sword-shaped jade pendant and gave it to Chernin. This jade pendant was also a treasure. Once refined and worn, it could clear one's mind and focus one's mind and spirit. It could also help one's comprehension. To a certain extent, it could even resist external evil from invading one's mind. However, the most important thing was the method that Chernzong had left in it. Chernzong had infused some of his power into the jade pendant so that it could explode at a critical moment. A clone of himself would appear, one that possessed 30% of his combat strength. With less than 30% of Chernzong's full combat strength, he was still at the top of the Transcendent Saint plane, which was enough to dominate the void. This way, he could ensure Chen An's safety to the greatest extent. In addition, Chernzong also planned to use his recommendation on Chen An so that Chen An could enter the Ancient Illumination Palace of the Ancient Illumination Divine Dynasty to cultivate. Chen An's improvement would be more obvious there. However, Chen An's current strength was still not enough. He still needed to further hone himself. He needed to have the strength of the real Chaos ranking. There was no rush. There was no need to be too anxious. The road of cultivation was long. What they were fighting for was not a moment, but a lifetime. Chernin was still very young. Compared to other true saints, he was indeed very young. His talent was not bad, and his potential was not weak. There was still a lot of room for improvement. Every day, Chernzong would guide the swordsmanship of the elders of the Great Hao Mountain. He would also guide the cultivation of the disciples of the Great Hao Mountain. Chen An also received a lot of guidance and constantly improved. As for Yun Yanxin, she was still in seclusion. She continued to refine the bloodline of the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix and infused it into her own bloodline of the Star-Scorching Real Phoenix. This allowed the bloodline of the Star-Scorching Real Phoenix to improve and transform to a higher level. On this day, the Tianji Tower sent a message that the Palace Master of the Xian Flame Divine Palace, Sir God Xian Flame, had appeared in the Great Flame Mountain, a chaotic forbidden area. Chernzong had asked the Tianji Tower to search for Sir God Xian Flame's whereabouts after he returned. Chernzong had not forgotten what had happened back then. However, even now, he was very strong, but the formation of the Xian Flame Divine Palace was not weak. He did not know what tricks were inside. If there was a clone of a demigod, he would be courting death if he barged in. He could only wait for Sir God Xian Flame to leave before he left the Xian Flame Divine Palace. Although Sir God Xian Flame was very strong, to the current Chernzong, there was a limit to how strong he could be. Great Flame Mountain. After Chernzong received the news, his eyes flashed and he immediately set off. In the territory of the human clan, there were many forbidden areas. The Great Flame Mountain was one of them. The entire mountain was constantly burning with white flames, emitting bursts of light. That was how it got its name. It did not take long for Chernzong to arrive outside the Great Flame Mountain. He gazed at the huge mountain that was constantly burning and emitting endless light. The power of the flame was amazing. Without the strength of the true saint realm, it was impossible to enter. It could be said that even an invincible saint realm expert would be burned to ashes in a short time. It could be said that an ordinary true saint realm expert would feel very uncomfortable and would not be able to withstand it for a long time. However, there were also benefits to resisting the burning of the flame of the Great Flame Mountain. It could further refine one's strength and make it purer. Chunzong took a step forward. When he appeared again, he was already inside the Great Flame Mountain. Wisps of white flames were like torrents spat out by a giant beast. They constantly attacked from all directions and wrapped Chunzong's body as if they were going to burn him to ashes. Chunzong did not display any strength. He only relied on the strength of the universe's immortal body to resist the burning of the flame. Unfortunately, it's useless against me, Chunzong said secretly after feeling it carefully. However, he was not very disappointed. Although the flame of the Great Flame Mountain had the effect of refining one's body and cultivation, it also had its limitations. It was effective against ordinary true saints and top true saints, but its effect on ultimate true saints had weakened. As for Chunzong, he was now in the transcendent saint realm, which was beyond the true saint realm. Unless the power of the flame of the Great Flame Mountain increased by more than 10 times, it would be useless. His purpose of coming there was Sir God Xianyan. He did not expect to be able to refine his cultivation. In the deepest part of the Great Flame Mountain, there was a blazing white flame that kept burning. The aura that it gave out was extremely terrifying, as if it could burn everything. The blazing white flame was only the size of a fist. However, the aura that it gave out was extremely terrifying. The surroundings turned into a vacuum that kept twisting as if it was going to collapse. A figure approached quickly and stared at the blazing white flame that was the size of a fist. He instantly revealed a smile. The information that I received was correct. It's really the origin of flame. The person was Sir God Xianyan. He stared at the blazing white flame and was extremely excited. As long as I refine the origin of flame, my power will definitely increase again. By then, there will be hope for me to defeat Sir God Wu. In order to prevent any unexpected events from happening, Sir God Xianyan was excited and he immediately took action. He threw out handprints that condensed into a net that flew towards the origin of flame to collect it. He would collect it first and then refine it so that he could increase his power further. You are really here. Just then, there was a voice that entered Sir God Xianyan's ears casually. Who is it? Sir God Xianyan instantly collected the origin of flame. Then, he suddenly turned his head and his pupils contracted. Chunzong. The person who had come was Chunzong. Although the Great Flame Mountain was huge and the flame was burning continuously, the deeper it was, the more powerful it was. However, to Chunzong then, it was nothing. There was no threat at all. Hence, Chunzong found Sir God Xianyan's location very quickly. It's you. Seeing Chunzong, Sir God Xianyan was surprised. Then, he smiled ferociously. If so, this will be your burial ground. Until then, Sir God Xianyan still didn't know how powerful Chunzong was as Chunzong kept a low profile. Plus, Sir God Xianyan didn't know anything about him when he entered Zhaogu God Dynasty. That was because the demigod ancestor of Xianyan Divine Palace belonged to Wankong God Dynasty and not Zhaogu God Dynasty. Sir God Xianyan didn't know much about Zhaogu God Dynasty and he didn't know Chunzong's current power level. However, Sir God Xianyan had entered Wankong God Dynasty's Wankong God Palace to cultivate. Compared to before, his power had increased significantly. Hence, he was very confident. He had planned to first defeat Sir God Wu after refining the origin of flame and then destroy Taihao Mountain. He didn't expect Chunzong to take the initiative to appear in front of him. If so, he would kill him there first. Explode. Sir God Xianyan's power exploded in an instant. The flames kept burning and he turned into a 10-meter-tall giant covered in white flames. He slapped at Chunzong. Chunzong was a little surprised. Compared to before, Sir God Xianyan's power had increased significantly. He had at least doubled. It seemed that he had been lucky. However, this kind of improvement was still too weak and insignificant to him. Chunzong didn't plan to deal with Sir God Xian Yen slowly. He pointed with his finger. He didn't even draw his heavenly will sword. He just pointed with his finger and a ray of sword light shot out. It immediately destroyed the white flame palm print and went towards Sir God Xian Yen with irresistible force. Sir God Xian Yan's power had doubled, but he was still in true saint realm. Even if Chunzong didn't equip his ancient divine sword armor and didn't draw his sword, the power of his sword finger had surpassed true saint realm and reached surpassing saint realm. He couldn't block it. Emperor God Xian Yan's body was immediately hit and penetrated. As the sword aura wreaked havoc, Emperor God Xian Yan's expression changed greatly. He was extremely terrified. Without any hesitation, Emperor God Xian Yan immediately unleashed his full power and a blazing flame blasted at Chunzong. However, he flew backward. "You think you can leave?" Chunzong chuckled. Chapter 33-26. In the Great Flame Mountain, where Divine Lord Xian Yan had died, his body had been completely destroyed. It had turned into powder and scattered inside the Great Flame Mountain. Light Flame Origin. As Chunzong flew out of the Great Flame Mountain, a ball of blazing white flame burned in his hand. It gave off a terrifying aura, as if it was as heavy as a mountain. As its power fluctuated, it seemed as if it wanted to shatter everything around it. An ordinary true Saint Realm expert would not be able to resist such an aura. Only those who had reached the peak of the true Saint Realm could resist its aura and refine it. Unfortunately, the light flame origin was useless to him. It was only useful to those in the true Saint Realm. Chunzong returned to Taihao Mountain with the light flame origin and gave it to Chunan. This quintessence of flames was useless to him, yet it was a precious treasure to Chunan, and it was sufficient to temper and purify his cultivation a step further, causing the might he erupted with to become even stronger. It indirectly improved his strength, and it was even capable of causing the blazing energy within his strength to become even stronger. Chunan had inherited part of Chunzong's talent in swordsmanship and the star-burning phoenix bloodline. It was the optimized star-burning phoenix bloodline. It was more perfect than Yun Yanxin's bloodline. His potential was naturally better than Yun Yanxin's. If he refined the light flame origin, his strength would increase significantly. After giving the light flame origin to Chun to refine, Chunzong went to see the war demon. The war demon was wearing a black robe and a ghost mask. Its aura was very obscure. However, Chunzong could still feel that the war demon's aura was very strong. It was 2 or 3 times stronger than before. He could not help but be surprised. However, it was reasonable that the war demon's strength could increase, since his strength could increase. After all, the war demon was different from other practitioners. It was a fusion of the will of a world and the soul of God Gong Tianxin. It had a unique talent and could be considered to have unlimited potential. As the world grew stronger, the war demon's strength would also increase, and vice versa. Seeing Chunzong again, the war demon was excited. It immediately asked to spar with Chunzong. Chunzong was also very curious about the war demon's strength, so he agreed immediately. Fight. In this battle, Chunzong didn't equip the ancient god sword armor. He didn't need to equip the ancient god sword armor to test the war demon's strength. The peak true saint realm, or the peak demon king realm, had already stepped into the demon overlord realm. If he made another breakthrough, he would be a transcendent saint realm powerhouse. As expected, as the manifestation of a world's will, the war demon's nature was indeed extraordinary. If it weren't for the fact that he had encountered many opportunities, perhaps he wouldn't have been able to improve as fast as the war demon. Such strength had already surpassed that of the martial god lord if the martial god lord's strength had not increased by much. However, the war demon wasn't a high-profile person. His ranking on the real primal chaos ranking didn't rise any further. The war demon was also shocked by Chen Zong's strength. He was much stronger than he had expected, and he was even more curious about Chen Zong's experiences. Chen Zong did not hide anything, and he told the war demon about how he had entered the ancient Zhao God dynasty. As the war demon listened, his eyes shone brightly under the ghost mask. He yearned to enter the ancient Zhao God dynasty. Unfortunately, Chen Zong had made up his mind to give his recommendation to Chen. If the war demon wanted to enter, he would have to find a way himself. After bidding farewell to the war demon, Chen Zong returned to the Lingwu Holy World to visit his father and sister. In the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed since Chen Zong left the ancient Zhao God dynasty and returned to Taihao Mountain. Chen had already refined the origin of the light flame. His cultivation had risen to the peak true saint realm. With the addition of his sword and armor, as well as his increasingly powerful swordsmanship, he had successfully challenged to rank 70th on the real primal chaos ranking. However, Chen Zong had given Chen a request, or rather a goal, and that was to enter the top 10 of the real primal chaos ranking. Only then would he give his recommendation to Chen. However, Chen Zong didn't mention anything about the recommendation. He only made a request. If one only had the strength of an ordinary person on the real primal chaos ranking, it would be difficult for them to gain any advantage after entering the ancient Zhao God Palace. Only those who were in the top 10 of the real primal chaos ranking could enter the ancient Zhao God Palace. However, that was all. For example, the strength of the 100 Swords Divine Lord and the 5 Ultimate Sword Divine Lord could only be considered above average in the ancient Zhao God Palace. They were inferior to the various king's disciples. Having the strength to enter the top 10 of the real primal chaos ranking was the most basic requirement that Chen Zong had for Chen, and otherwise, it would be difficult for him to obtain many opportunities after entering the ancient Zhao God Palace. On this day in January of this year, a powerful aura suddenly erupted from where Yun Yanxin was cultivating in seclusion. Above the seclusion's secret room, wisps of aura spread out and gathered, turning into flaming clouds that floated in the sky. Each flaming cloud was in the shape of a fire bird. They seemed to be burning as they spread their wings and flew high in the sky. They also let out clear chirps. An entire 100 blazing phoenixes had condensed into form in the sky. Every single phoenix was 10 meters in size, and as the 100 of them circled around, they emanated numerous shocking fluctuations of might that swept out towards the surroundings, causing everyone from the elders to the disciples of Sky Vast Mountain to focus their gazes over and exclaim endlessly with admiration. What was that? Only Chen Zong knew that it was a phenomenon that appeared when Yun Yanxin successfully refined the bloodline of the heavenly fire sacred phoenix and merged it into his own star-scorching true phoenix bloodline, causing his own star-scorching true phoenix bloodline to be greatly enhanced. Immediately after, an even more resounding and clear cry resounded through the heavens and earth. Even the entire Yuanzhan University could hear it clearly, causing everyone to be shocked. They all looked towards the sky above Taihao Mountain and vaguely saw an endless amount of fire chi billowing out. Burning. Constantly burning. In the sky above Taihao Mountain, endless fire chi billowed out like a raging sea. Finally, it turned into a huge flaming lake that was 10,000 meters wide. 100 flaming phoenixes circled around the flaming lake, as if they were guarding it. Something seemed to be nurturing in the flaming lake. There was a deep, reserved power condensing. Slowly, a speck of white appeared in the flaming lake and quickly spread out. Finally, under everyone's shocked gazes, the entire flaming lake turned white. It was a pure white that was filled with a divine radiance. Seeing the pure white of the divine radiance, everyone's hearts trembled involuntarily. They felt that it seemed to contain an endless amount of power. Immediately after, Even the 100 flaming phoenixes were dyed white. It was even more shocking. A second chirp that was even louder sounded from the flaming lake. A shadow seemed to appear. Gradually, a stream of light rushed out from the flaming lake and soared into the sky. It was a palm-sized phoenix that was burning with white flames. It looked extremely sacred. As soon as the white phoenix appeared, the flaming lake rolled up and surged into the phoenix. The phoenix's body continued to expand. It grew from the size of a palm to half a meter, then 1 meter, 2 meters. When all the power of the flaming lake surged into the phoenix's body, the sacred white phoenix had grown to 100 meters in size. It slowly flapped its wings and endless white flames burned, spreading out layers of light. The phoenix crown soared into the sky like a flickering flame. The phoenix's tail fluttered as it streaked across the void. It explained an indescribable mystery, as if it was the king of phoenixes. 100 flaming phoenixes flew around it. 100 phoenixes were paying homage to the phoenix. Immediately after, the flaming phoenixes spread their wings and rushed into the sacred white phoenix's body. The phoenix's aura became more and more solid. The burning sacred white flames became more and more intense. The void around it was distorted, as if it was about to collapse. Aura. An extremely terrifying aura spread out and swept across Taihao Mountain. It rushed out of Taihao Mountain and covered Yuanzhan Cosmic City. This aura was so strong that it suppressed everyone in Yuanzhan Cosmic City and made them unable to move. In Taihao Mountain, other than Chunzong, the strongest were the 100 Swords God and the 5 Ultimate Swords God. However, at this moment, the two of them looked extremely serious. This was because this aura made them feel threatened. When the 100 flaming phoenixes all merged into the sacred white phoenix, the third chirp sounded. It was even louder, sharper, and clearer. It seemed to penetrate the 9 heavens. It soared into the sky. The sacred white phoenix soared into the sky and circled in the sky. Everyone could clearly see the beautiful and powerful figure of the phoenix. They were all amazed. That was such a beautiful life. It could not be described with words. Chunzong stared at the figure of the phoenix. His eyes flickered with divine light. Under his gaze, he could clearly feel the power that the phoenix possessed. It was extremely shocking. In the next moment, the sacred white phoenix swooped down from the sky. It rushed directly into Yun Yenshin's secret room in a determined manner. It seemed to want to destroy everything. However, when the phoenix rushed in, it disappeared. The tyrannical aura also seemed to dissipate. Everything returned to silence. Only Chen Zong could feel an astonishing power being born in the secluded cultivation room, and it was slowly growing stronger. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, an increasingly tyrannical aura suddenly burst out from the secret room. Then, a figure broke through the air like a sword and rushed into the 9 heavens. Yun Yenshin. That figure was Yun Yenshin. His body was burning with a layer of white flames. He looked extremely sacred. He was completely different from the usual Yun Yenshin. It was as if he was wearing a phoenix crown and a phoenix robe. His entire body exuded a sacred aura that made people want to worship him. Chen Zong could not help but show a look of joy. Very powerful. The power of the bloodline and the power of the bloodline were extremely powerful. It was very shocking and indescribable. It's even stronger than the power of the bloodline of the heavenly fire sacred phoenix. Chen Zong was very happy that he could accurately identify it. This meant that Yun Yenshin's potential and strength had increased tremendously. It would not be difficult for him to reach the transcendent saint realm in the future. He only needed to continue cultivating and tap into the potential of his bloodline. The sacred flames were restrained. The phoenix crown and phoenix robe were restrained. Yun Yenshin's original appearance was revealed. He walked down with a smile on his face. Chapter 33:27. After successfully refining the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix bloodline and fusing it into his own star-scorching True Phoenix bloodline, it went surprisingly smoothly. The star-scorching True Phoenix completely absorbed the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix bloodline and used it as nutrients to improve itself, allowing it to constantly break through its limit. Previously, Yunyenshin's star-scorching True Phoenix bloodline was not weak, but it was not very strong either. Strength and weakness were relative. Strength was relative to ordinary cultivators, while weakness was relative to celestial or demonic bloodlines. Yunyenshin had already stimulated the potential of his star-scorching True Phoenix bloodline. It had basically reached its limit, and it was very difficult for it to improve any further. However, such a level of star-scorching True Phoenix bloodline was barely comparable to the most ordinary celestial bloodline, or even slightly inferior. In addition, celestial bloodlines had very high growth potential, but Yunyenshin's star-scorching True Phoenix bloodline did not have such growth potential, making the difference even more obvious. But this time, after devouring the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix bloodline, not only did his star-scorching True Phoenix bloodline soar to the level of a pinnacle celestial bloodline, it was even stronger than the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix bloodline, nearing the paramount celestial bloodline. Another point was that the star-scorching True Phoenix bloodline originally had a hard time breaking through its limit. However, although the celestial bloodline also had its limits, there was still the possibility of breaking through them. In any case, the bloodline of the star-scorching True Phoenix had already undergone a complete transformation. Its essence had been upgraded by several levels. Yunyenshin's strength had soared by leaps and bounds. At the same time, her potential had also soared to an astonishing level. The white burning star True Flame contained an astonishing holy power, and it was especially effective against evil spirits. Under Chen Zong's verification, he confirmed that Yunyenshin's strength had soared several times from before, reaching the level of a pinnacle heavenly king or demon king. He was stronger than the Sword's God and the 5 ultimate sword master. Perhaps in terms of swordsmanship, Yunyenshin was still incomparable to Sword's God Lord and Sword's God Lord of 5 ultimate swords. However, the true flame of Burning Star was too powerful. Sword's God Lord and Sword's God Lord of 5 ultimate swords did not dare to take it head-on. The most important thing was that the potential of the 100 Swords Divine Lord and the 5 ultimate sword Divine Lord was almost fully developed. If they did not obtain a greater opportunity in this life, they could only stop at this level. The peak Demon King level was their limit, but the upper limit of Yunyenshin had been raised to the Demon Emperor level, Heavenly Venerable level, and Transcendent Sage level. In the future, it was not impossible for him to break through to the demigod realm. Yunyenshin had successfully refined the bloodline of the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix, causing his star-scorching True Phoenix bloodline to be greatly enhanced. It had undergone a metamorphosis, and his strength had increased by several times. His potential had also been raised to an even higher level. According to Chernzong's plan, this was the time for him to travel. However, Yunyenshin suggested that they wait a little longer. During this period of time, Yunyenshin used the star-scorching True Flames to refine Chen An's bloodline. Chen An's bloodline had inherited Yunyenshin's star-scorching True Phoenix bloodline, but it had been further improved from the original foundation. If Yunyenshin's star-scorching True Phoenix bloodline could only barely reach the level of an ordinary heavenly human rank bloodline, then Chen An's star-scorching True Phoenix bloodline was truly at the level of an ordinary heavenly human rank bloodline. Now Yunyenshin had refined and absorbed the bloodline essence of the Skyfire Sacred Phoenix, causing his star-scorching True Phoenix bloodline to increase exponentially, completely surpassing Chen An's bloodline. However, the two bloodlines were of the same origin. Therefore, Yunyenshin could use his star-scorching True Flames to refine Chen An's bloodline, further increasing his potential. The consequence of doing so would be to deplete Yunyenshin's bloodline essence, causing a certain degree of damage. It would require a lot of time and resources to slowly recover, but for her child, she was willing to do so. Chunzong did not stop Yunyenshin from doing so. This refinement took a few more years and finally reached its peak. Chun An's bloodline level increased to the level of an elite heavenly human rank bloodline. However, it did not have the growth potential of a heavenly human rank bloodline. On the other hand, Yunyenshin's power had been weakened a lot, and her strength had been reduced by a few %. Her bloodline had almost fallen below the top level, and she could barely maintain it. Fortunately, Chunzong had purchased many elixirs over the years to stabilize Yunyenshin's bloodline. However, it had also decreased to a certain extent, affecting his potential. However, with the characteristics of a heavenly human rank bloodline, he could gradually recover over time. After receiving the refinement of Yunyenshin's star-burning true flame for a few years, Chun An's bloodline level had increased. As a result, his strength had increased a lot, and so had his potential. With Chunzong's guidance on swordsmanship and Yunyenshin's refinement of his bloodline, Chun An's strength could be said to have increased by leaps and bounds in just a few years. Chun An began to challenge the experts in the top 10 of the real chaotic ranking. In the first battle, his opponent was ranked 9th on the real chaotic ranking and was defeated by Chun An. In the second battle, his opponent was ranked 6th on the real chaotic ranking. Chun An only won after a fierce battle. In the third battle, his opponent was ranked 4th on the real chaotic ranking. In this battle, Chun An used all his strength to defeat his opponent and successfully replaced his opponent's ranking. As for the fourth battle, there was no one, because the top 3 on the real chaotic ranking were Martial God Lord, 5 Ultimate Swordmaster, and 100 Swords God Lord. Chun An's strength was still inferior to 100 Swords God Lord, but his potential was greater. It was only a matter of time before he surpassed 100 Swords God Lord and 5 Ultimate Swordmaster. He might even surpass Martial God Lord. In this way, he had achieved the goal that Chunzong had set for Chun An all those years ago. Chunzong set off with Chun An and Yunyenshin, heading towards the ancient Mirror Chaos City. As for Taihao Mountain, there was a transcendent Saint Realm clone there, so there was no need to worry. Moreover, 100 Swords God Lord and 5 Ultimate Swordmaster were there as well, so they could fend off many external enemies. It was worth mentioning that this time, thanks to Chunzong's guidance, 100 Swords God Lord and 5 Ultimate Swordmaster's swordsmanship had improved by quite a bit. 5 Ultimate Swordmaster had also formally joined Taihao Mountain, becoming an elder instead of a guest. 3 figures appeared in the Space-Time Temple's formation in the ancient Mirror Chaos City at the same time. They did not linger in the city for long. Instead, they quickly left the city and flew towards the ancient Mirror God dynasty. When Yunyenshin and Chun An saw the huge platform for the first time, they were both surprised. Although the platform looked very simple, the profoundness contained in every pattern on it was extraordinary, and it had a great impact on everyone's mind. "Lord Guling," Chunzong called out. First, an old voice sounded, then a baby-like person appeared. Yunyenshin and Chun An were secretly surprised. However, they had been informed by Chunzong on their way here, so they did not show it. They only kept it to themselves. "So it's you." The baby-like Lord Guling glanced at Chunzong with some interest. He had some impression of Chunzong. After all, it had not been long since they last met. At least for a being like Guling, a few decades was nothing. Sometimes it would be over after a nap. He did not expect Chunzong to be so powerful the last time they met. How long had it been since they last met? Chunzong's power had increased a lot. His strength had also increased a lot. The speed of his improvement was truly astonishing. However, Guling was only slightly interested. After all, he was not a human. He was just a spiritual body. Whether Chunzong was strong or weak really had nothing to do with him. Chen Zong opened the gate and led Yun Yanxin and Chen An inside. Although he brought Yun Yanxin could not stay in the ancient Mirror God dynasty for long. After entering the ancient Mirror God dynasty, he brought Chen An to the ancient Mirror Hall to take the test. With Chen An's current strength, it was not difficult for him to pass the test. There were no drawbacks to the bloodline test. He passed right away and became an outer disciple of the ancient Mirror Hall. After that, he could stay in the ancient Mirror Hall to cultivate. After that, Chen Zong brought Chen An to visit Zhong Ligingming. He told him that Chen An was his son. Zhong Ligingming understood Chen Zong's intentions. After knowing that Chen An was Chen Zong's son, Zhong Ligingming was very enthusiastic. From now on, cultivate well. Chen Zong instructed Chen An, and there was no need for him to speak any further. Presently, Chen An wasn't a child that didn't know anything. Conversely, he had his own complete views, and there was no need for Chen Zong to speak any further. Bai Yi and Jing Wuxue were still in the Dark Sky Empire. Naturally, they could not see them. Chen Zong did not plan to stay for long. Because of the rules, Yun Yanxin could not stay for long. Not long after, Chen Zong and Yun Yanxin formed a hand seal and left, leaving Chen An alone to cultivate. Outside the gate of the ancient Mirror God dynasty, Chen Zong and Yun Yanxin stood on a huge circular platform, looking into the distance. Yanxin, from today onwards, we will travel all over the territory of the original human race, Chen Zong said with a smile. Yun Yanxin smiled and nodded. The chaotic universe was vast, and the territory of the human race and origin clan was only a part of it. There was also the territory of the ancient demon race, the celestial demon race, and many other races. There was even an unexplored region beyond these territories, which was called the Outer Region. After all, the chaotic universe had only existed for a little more than 1,000 years. Compared to any era of the universe, it was still in its infancy. If the universe was compared to a person, then the chaotic universe was still in its infancy. It was the kind of infancy that had just learned to crawl. Therefore, there were still some unexplored places in the chaotic universe. Perhaps some demigods had been there, but those below the demigod level rarely set foot in them. A great cosmos naturally contained countless dangers and danger zones. Some of them were already known, while others were still unknown. Not to mention other things, the territories of the original human race and the original human race were very vast. Even a demigod would have to spend a lot of time to travel all over the territory. Chen Zong planned to travel the territories of the original human race with Yun Yanxin. First, he wanted to increase his knowledge and experience so that he could increase his accumulation and foundation. Then, he might be enlightened and further improve his swordsmanship. Second, he wanted to find a more suitable place for Taihao Mountain to establish a sect. Chapter 33-28. The territory of the human clan and the origin clan was so vast that countless cultivators would not be able to explore it in their entire life. Chen Zong and Yun Yanxin began to travel and explore. Of course, with their strength, even the so-called chaotic forbidden areas were not too dangerous. For example, the Great Flame Mountain from before. The power of the flames was shocking. Ordinary true saints did not dare to enter, and even the top true saints did not dare to enter. However, for Chen Zong and Yun Yanxin, it was like there was no defense. Chen Zong had thought about this before, and that was to use the Great Flame Mountain as the place where Taihao Mountain would be established. The flames in the Great Flame Mountain could temper one's body and cultivation power. If the sect was established there, it would undoubtedly be another holy land for cultivation. It would be greatly beneficial to the entire sect. Unfortunately, he could only think about it. It was too difficult. The Great Flame Mountain was huge. He could easily enter and exit it, but he could not control it. He could only look for other places. Yuanzhan Cosmos City was indeed a good place for Taihao Mountain in the past. It was very rare. However, it had become a hindrance to the current Taihao Mountain. The current Taihao Mountain was more than 100 times stronger than it had been in the past. Chen Zong and Yun Yanxin traveled by themselves. They did not use the teleportation array of the Spacetime Temple. Since they were going to travel, they had to look like they were traveling. They flew by themselves. This way they could more directly experience different sceneries. Moving Taihao Mountain to Primal Chaos City was also a good idea. After all, Primal Chaos City's cultivation environment and resources were obviously better than Yuanzhan Cosmos City's. However, Chen Zong still hoped to establish Taihao Mountain in the void. It would be best if they could find a better place. If they could not find a better place, then they could only enter Primal Chaos City. Time passed slowly. Chen Zong and Yun Yanxin were constantly flying in the void, enjoying all kinds of sceneries. Occasionally they would enter some cities to take a rest. No matter what level the city was at, as long as it was close to the city, it would be fine. Relaxing one's body and mind was just like going out to play. Unknowingly, it was also in line with the path of cultivation. Today, two people came to the Changrong restaurant in the Changrong Universe City. It was a man and a woman. They looked very young, and their auras were restrained. However, people with discerning eyes could tell at a glance that this man and woman were not ordinary people. They were Chen Zong and Yun Yanxin. Walking into the Changrong restaurant, Chen Zong asked the waiter to serve a table of signature dishes and 2 jars of fine wine. He slowly tasted them with Yun Yanxin. Today, Changrong Cosmic City was different from before. It was much livelier. From time to time, cultivators with powerful auras would walk out of the temporal temple, surprising everyone. It was all because of one thing. A great treasure appeared, and it was obtained by someone. There was also a group of people who chased after it in an attempt to seize that great treasure. This treasure was called the World Fragment. What was a world fragment? It was a fragment of a world that was luckily left behind after it was destroyed. Perhaps it didn't look big from the outside, but the inside was a space of its own. It could be opened up into a secret realm or something like that. It was extremely valuable. With such a great treasure, wouldn't it be the best place to start a sect? If it could form a small world of its own, then it would not be easy to be attacked by others. It could completely develop well. Even if it could not be used as a place to start a sect, it could still be used as a large backer. In short, the benefits were great. Chen Zong could not help but be tempted. It was also because of this that Chen Zong and Yun Yanxin came to the Changrong Universe City. Obtaining the world fragment, the whereabouts of the cultivator who obtained the treasure were very secretive. He seemed to be very proficient in how to hide himself. Therefore, until now, only people knew that he had come to the Changrong Universe City, but they still did not know where he was. Even so, many powerful cultivators rushed over, just to find that person's whereabouts and seize the world fragment. Chen Zong and Yun Yanxin also did not know where the person who obtained the world fragment was. However, since there was news that this person was appearing in the Changrong Universe City, they also followed. The world fragment. If possible, Chen Zong must obtain it. Somewhere in the Changrong Universe City, in a seemingly simple house, there was a hidden mystery. The light was dim, and one could vaguely see 3 figures. 3 figures wearing black robes that covered their entire bodies. Have you found out how many people have come? The black-robed man sitting in the middle asked in a low and hoarse voice. There are quite a lot of people this time. Just the people on the Chaos Real roll alone are 26. The black-robed man on the left chuckled and said, there are also more than 50 experts who are second only to the Chaos Real roll. Let's continue to wait. The black-robed man in the middle said in a hoarse voice, it's best if a few people with enough weight come. When the time comes, we can catch them all in one fell swoop. Only then will it not be in vain for us to use this treasure as bait. Boss is indeed wise. The black-robed man on the right chuckled and complimented. However, won't it be too obvious if we do this and arouse suspicion? So what if they suspect? The world fragment is real. Wealth moves people's hearts. Even if someone suspects it, they will eventually be tempted. Remember, release news of the world fragment from time to time to keep them in suspense. The black-robed man in the middle reminded, when the time comes, let them all enter the world fragment and serve our master. No one knew that the world fragment was bait. It was bait to attract more experts. Only a treasure with enough weight could attract those experts and make them take action. If it was not enough, it could only attract some ordinary cultivators. Moreover, even if it was so simple and aroused the suspicion of others, as long as there was enough weight, it would still attract many people. This was not a conspiracy. It was even an open conspiracy. From time to time, news of the world fragment would spread even further and let more people know about it, attracting more experts. Chen Zong could not help but smile with a playful look on his face. With his keen mind, he immediately grasped the anomaly. Coupled with his extremely sharp senses, he immediately felt that there seemed to be a pair of invisible hands controlling everything behind the world fragment. However, Chen Zong was not afraid. He only had one request, which was that the world fragment had to be real. As long as it was real, even if there was a conspiracy, it was not impossible to face it. This was the confidence brought by great power. In the current chaotic universe, excluding the 3 divine dynasties, the true saint realm experts were the strongest. There were no transcending saints at all. Even if there were, they were from the 3 divine dynasties. However, even among the transcending saints in the 3 divine dynasties, Chen Zong was at the top level. The strength of an extreme transcending saint realm expert was almost invincible. It could be said that if a demigod did not appear, no one could compete with him. Since that was the case, even if there was a conspiracy, Chen Zong was confident that he could deal with it. That was why he could remain calm. Otherwise, if he was not strong enough, he would have retreated when he sensed that something was wrong and immediately left this place to avoid being involved. Then, who was controlling all of this? What was the purpose? Or could it be that this was just an illusion of his? Chen Zong believed in his own feelings. There was a high chance that he would not be wrong. Time passed, and more experts arrived at Changrong University. The most powerful among them was the Imperial Thunder Divine Lord, who was ranked 5th on the Chaos Real roll. The Imperial Thunder Divine Lord was born close to the power of thunder. After embarking on the path of cultivation, he easily comprehended the way of thunder and mastered the powerful power of the great Tao of thunder. He was very strong. The Imperial Thunder Divine Lord had only been listed on the Real Chaos Leaderboard in the past few decades and had reached the 5th place in the Real Chaos Leaderboard in less than a decade. He wasn't old, only a little over 100 years old. A genius. A peerless genius. He was young and powerful, so he naturally had extraordinary boldness and arrogance. I must obtain the world fragment, the Imperial Thunder Divine Lord thought to himself, and his eyes flashed with bolts of lightning. 5th on the Chaos Real roll was a very high ranking. He had planned to challenge the top 4 of the Chaos Real roll after coming out of seclusion this time and defeat them to replace them. However, he did not expect to hear the news of the world fragment and immediately rush over. He would first obtain the world fragment. As for the challenges, he could wait for a while. Finally, a piece of news suddenly spread. The person who possessed the world fragment had appeared and escaped from Changrong University, heading out of the void. Now, he was in a ruined land thousands of miles away. Very few people investigated how the news spread because they were all shocked by the words world fragment and ignited the desire in their hearts. They had to obtain such a precious treasure. Whether it was for their own use or to sell it, it had an astonishing use and value. Get it? A large group of people immediately rushed out of Changrong University at an astonishing speed. Among them, the fastest one was a bolt of lightning. It was a silver bolt of lightning that contained an extremely shocking power. It was the Imperial Thunder Divine Lord. He unleashed his full speed and was the fastest and the fastest. As for Chen Zong and Yun Yanxin, they left Changrong University at a leisurely pace. Since Chen Zong had speculated that there was a mastermind controlling all of this, even though he was full of confidence in his own strength, he would not be blind and did not intend to charge at the front. He would first take a look and see what was going on. With his own strength, he should be able to deal with everything. If there was any conspiracy, he could just draw his sword and break it when the time came. Hundreds of cultivators, each of whom was at the true saint realm, were not weak. The most powerful ones were, of course, those who were ranked on the Chaos Real roll. These people had not had any conflicts yet. Only when they found the world fragment would a real battle break out. Chen Zong and Yun Yanxin slowly followed behind these people. They did not seem to be in a hurry at all. It was as if they were going on a scenic tour. They were so calm and leisurely. As the two of them followed from afar, they would chat from time to time. In the void thousands of miles away from Changrong University, there was a ruin. It was a ruin of a continent. The bolt of lightning that the Imperial Thunder Divine Lord had transformed into was leading the charge into the ruin of the continent that was hundreds of miles in radius. He was far ahead. Following that, the others rushed in one after another. In an instant, bolts of silver lightning exploded in the ruins. Shocking thunder resounded in all directions. The aura was extremely violent, as if a battle was breaking out. This battle did not last long. It was only about 10 breaths of time before the erupting lightning stopped. Stop, don't even think about escaping. A furious voice suddenly exploded. It was like rolling thunder that shook all directions, carrying a hint of anger. Chapter 33-29. Lightning flashed again, streaking across the sky and disappearing in an instant. Over there! Quick, quick, quick! The fragment of the world is mine. No one can get it. Accompanied by furious roars, numerous figures flew over at an extremely fast speed. In the next moment, the tyrannical auras were emitted one after another, causing the people who had rushed over from behind to be surprised and bewildered. What was going on? Just a moment ago, there were still powerful auras, but after a moment, they disappeared as if they had never appeared. Were they all dead? That was not right. Even if they were killed in an instant, there should be some signs. Among them, there was the peerless expert Imperial Thunder Emperor, who was ranked 5th on the real chaotic ranking. He was extremely powerful. Who could kill him in an instant? Even Imperial Thunder Emperor, who was ranked 1st on the real chaotic ranking, could not do it. The cultivators who did not know the strength of the 3 great divine dynasties could only think of this. The level of the Saint Transcendence realm was too far away for them. Therefore, some people thought that the top 3 on the real chaos ranking board might be able to fight against a demigod. However, they did not know how powerful a demigod was. Even if a demigod stood still, did not dodge or deliberately defended, and allowed an expert on the real chaos ranking board to attack, he would not be hurt at all. In the distance, Chen Zong and Yun Yanxin gradually approached the ruins of the land. Feeling the eruption and disappearance of the auras, Chen Zong could not help but reveal a look of surprise. The mixed Yuan heart force spread out. Immediately, Chen Zong smiled. So that was it. On the ruins of the land, a dark door appeared. It was oval-shaped, about 3 meters tall and 1 meter wide. It was like a dark water that was constantly rippling. As the gloomy aura filled the air, it seemed to be connected to another world. The people whose auras had disappeared just now had rushed into the dark door. It's getting more and more interesting, Chen Zong could not help but secretly say. The people behind also noticed the dark door, but they were a little hesitant. Suddenly, someone shouted, "The fragment of the world is inside." After that, more people began to rush forward and rushed into the dark door. Gradually, hundreds of experts of the true saint realm rushed into the dark door and disappeared as if they had been swallowed. Chen Zong and Yun Yanxin appeared outside the dark door. Yun Yanxin looked at Chen Zong with a look of inquiry. "Let's go." After looking at the dark door for a few breaths, Chen Zong's mouth suddenly hung a smile, as if he had understood something. Then, he stepped out, holding Yun Yanxin's hand, and stepped into the dark door. In that instant, he felt as if he had passed through water. It was extremely strange. The earth was dark brown and the color was deep and low. There were many broken places and potholes as if it had been hit by a meteor shower. The chi of heaven and earth here was several times thinner than the outside world. To some extent, it would affect the strength of the cultivators. Of course, the strength of the experts of the true saint realm would not be affected in a short period of time. But in a long period of time, once they used up too much of their strength in battle, it would not be so easy to recover. They could only take elixirs. However, in order to fight for a treasure like the fragment of the world, some harsh environment was not unbearable. As long as they could get the fragment of the world, some of the sacrifices would be meaningful. The fragment of the world was extremely valuable. It was at least worth hundreds of millions of chaotic divine gems, or even more. Chen Zong felt that there were powerful auras in the distance. It seemed that a battle was about to break out. He flew over with Yun Yanxin. They seemed to be neither fast nor slow, but in fact their speed was amazing. This was a miniature world. At the center of the miniature world, a palm-sized, rhombus-shaped black crystal slowly appeared in the air. The black crystal gave off an extremely profound presence, which was enough for people to tell that it was extraordinary. It was a treasure. The core of the fragment of the world. Someone suddenly exclaimed. "Quickly refine it. As long as you refine the core, you can get the fragment of the world." A second voice sounded, immediately making everyone excited. "This item is mine. Whoever dares to touch it will die." The Imperial Thunder Divine Monarch roared. His body burst out with astonishing lightning, and he instantly charged at the prismatic black crystal. "Imperial Thunder Emperor, so what? The treasure doesn't have your name on it." Someone shouted and immediately slashed out a stunning saber light. The Imperial Thunder God Monarch's ranking was indeed very high, and his strength was also very strong. However, for a treasure like the world fragment, no one would give in. Thus, the Imperial Thunder God Monarch, who was the strongest, became the target of everyone. He became the primary target of everyone because he was the strongest. If they didn't join forces to deal with him, the treasure would be taken away. Among the crowd, only 3 people were the calmest. Although they also took action, they didn't get too excited. They were the ones who spoke just now. Chen Zong and Yun Yanxin stood in the distance and concealed their auras. They were even more hidden. For a moment no one noticed them. They were watching with interest. Chen Zong's gaze even stopped on the 3 people for 2 breaths. The 3 people looked ordinary and inconspicuous. They were scattered among the hundreds of people. "You are courting death." The Imperial Thunder Emperor was furious. Among the hundreds of people present, he was the most powerful. Now, there were people who dared to compete with him and even team up to deal with him. They were simply courting death. In his fury, vast lightning suddenly shot down from the sky. Each lightning was as thick as an arm and carried a terrifying power that could destroy everything. They blasted toward the other true saints, wanting to blast them all into pieces. In one blow, more than a dozen true saints were killed. Even the immortal body couldn't withstand it. They were directly charred black and died an unnatural death. The dead true saints were more ordinary true saints. Another 7 or 8 true saints had their immortal bodies destroyed. However, they quickly recovered and retreated in fear. The other true saints either dodged or resisted the lightning, but they didn't feel good either. The peerless expert who ranked 5th on the real chaotic ranking was definitely very powerful and terrifying. After killing more than a dozen people with one blow and injuring 7 or 8, the Imperial Thunder Emperor sneered. His eyes were filled with lightning as he glanced over. "You are courting death. Whoever dares to attack again, I will kill all of you." After saying that, the Imperial Thunder Emperor reached out to grab the prismatic black crystal. He wanted to take it and refine it. That is the core of this world. Once he refines it, everyone will die. Suddenly, someone exclaimed in anger. As long as he refines the core, he will be able to control this small world. By then, he will be able to control the life and death of others. The moment he said that, another pitch-black light tore through the sky like a roaring evil dragon. It exploded with astonishing power and directly blasted towards the Imperial Thunder Divine Lord. The power of that attack was not weak at all. Even the Imperial Thunder Divine Lord felt a little threatened. Anger. Extreme anger. The Imperial Thunder Emperor was completely enraged. He had repeatedly provoked him and attacked him. Did he really think that he was made of mud? As he attacked in anger, tens of thousands of lightning bolts filled the sky. In an instant, the Imperial Thunder Emperor enveloped everyone else and forced them to retreat. The ground was constantly bombarded and holes appeared. Die. His tyrannical strength was completely unleashed. The Imperial Thunder God turned into a bolt of lightning and directly smashed the indestructible body of a true divine realm expert. The terrifying lightning contained an astonishing destructive power and instantly exhausted the true divine realm expert's strength. He was unable to recover and was directly killed. He was indeed worthy of being a peerless expert ranked 5th on the real chaotic ranking. Once he was enraged, his strength was extremely terrifying. Experts who were not on the real chaotic ranking would not be able to withstand such strength. They would either die or be injured. Lightning cannon. The Imperial Thunder Emperor was extremely furious. He wanted to kill everyone there and obtain the prismatic black crystal. Only then could he ensure that he would not be disturbed by others. A thick silver lightning bolt was blasted out. Its power was extremely overbearing, and it shattered everything. The blow seemed to be able to shatter the world. Suddenly, another true Sage Realm expert was killed. Kill. Kill. Experts who were not on the real chaotic ranking could not fight back against the Imperial Thunder Emperor. The so-called alliance became a joke. Moreover, the Imperial Thunder Emperor intended to challenge the top 3 on the real chaotic ranking because his power was almost twice as strong as when he was ranked 50th on the real chaotic ranking. Such strength was incomparably shocking. There was no one present who was a match for him, and he swept through everything before him. Even the 20 or so experts on the chaotic real ranking didn't dare to confront the Imperial Thunder Divine Lord head-on because they were all ranked outside the top 10. The Imperial Thunder Emperor's power could obviously reach the top 3. The gap between his power and those below the top 10 was very obvious. In the face of absolute power, no one was a match for the Imperial Thunder Emperor. Retreat. Wealth moved people's hearts. However, more than 20 true sages had been killed consecutively. They were not cabbages. Anyone would be shocked. In particular, not only had they failed to kill the Imperial Thunder Divine Monarch, but nearly 10 of them had been killed instead. It had an extremely great impact on their minds and caused them to be extremely shocked. Seeing that everyone was retreating, the Imperial Thunder Emperor's eyes were cold and disdainful. He snorted coldly but did not pursue. Instead, he waved his hand and blasted out a lightning sword. The sword swept across the surroundings and drew out horizontal lines. Anyone who steps into this place will die. With that, the Imperial Thunder Divine Monarch walked towards the rhombus-shaped black crystal. Among the crowd, there were 3 figures who seemed to have inadvertently walked to a spot while retreating. Their eyes met in an instant, and 2 of them had a questioning look in their eyes. The other person also received the questioning look in their eyes and immediately nodded. The 3 of them seemed to be frightened by the Imperial Thunder Emperor's power. They did not take any action. However, their eyes were strange and excited as they stared at the Imperial Thunder Emperor who was walking toward the prismatic black crystal. They watched as the Imperial Thunder Emperor stretched out his hand and grabbed the black prismatic crystal. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.